All right, Javier. War Games hype in full final stretch here with Bayley making her case late to try to prove herself to Bianca Belair. But first, let's talk about the women's Intercontinental title being announced by Adam Pearce tonight. Just before Raw went on the air, they replayed it late in the show. Originally, they had said the women's U.S. title. I didn't hear this. People told me. So I'm trusting people. I shouldn't. I've learned my lessons on that. But some people, not many, not all. But people told me, they said the women's U.S. title was a floating title to represent both brands. And then they stopped saying that. And now there's a women's IC title. So, I mean, it makes more sense, honestly, if you're going to have split brands and be on completely different platforms, USA versus Netflix, and try to stick with having a separate world champion in each brand, separate women's champ. You might as well have two secondary women's titles. I think it would be a little confusing, frankly, to have one secondary champ floating between both brands defending against two brands. Well, the singles women's world titles are brand specific. This makes sense. It sort of, checks the equality box too. If you're going to have one, you might as well have two. I'm good with this. And, with the shows going to basically 3 hours from 2 to 3 starting in January, I don't like the phrase, this gives women something to fight about, because frankly, I thought Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher on Saturday had a lot more to fight about than any of the title matches. That was about stakes and journey and proving yourself. You don't need a belt if you're a good booker to make a match count. That said, I'm okay with this. How about you, Javier?
I'm okay with it, but
yeah, okay. More, I'm not enthusiastic, obviously.
Yeah, it's more like they're already doing it on one. I would rather have them not have done either of them. I've made a case to make the titles that you have more important. We haven't really the men's tag team division on Raw has only been defended like 3 times in 4 months or something like that. Give the other titles a little bit more shine to them. But if we're going to go do this, might as well do the IC. You're going to have. It just makes sense if both shows are going to go to 3 hours. So,
yeah, I think that if there's going to be one, I like 2. It would make no sense if the shows are staying the same length to add belts that don't get defended very often and get lost in the mix. But like I said, I'm okay with it, and I think some of it is with the booking. Do they do a good job making it seem like this wasn't just a fun idea that they had and then they sort of lose track of it? One of the benefits of it, Javier, is the women's world title matches. If the women's world titles aren't defended as often, then the IC and US title, especially the IC title, because they always talk about it being the workhorse title, but the US title too, the John Cena Open Challenge, all that. Both those belts sort of have workhorse reputations. So I'm okay with those belts being defended almost like TV titles, multiple times per month sometimes. Each.
Sort of what they're doing with the IC title, and Braun Breaker defended it today, sort of, and last week and stuff like that. While Gunther does it on pay-per-views. I could kind of get that.
Yeah. So we're okay with that. And as Derek Hubbard in the chat points out right now, with the up-and-coming talent pool in NXT, I can see the eventual opening for a mid-card title on Raw and SmackDown. However, the current roster is not deep enough to support the 2 belts. What this comes down to is a belief by Paul Levesque that he's got a strong women's division and that they can add women's segments to these shows and not displace men's segments that will draw more money and hold more interest. And it is a vote of confidence in the women. I hope it's not just a booking crutch, which is who wants to watch a match between 2 women unless there's a title at stake, which is, like I said earlier, that's a lazy booker approach. And frankly, you could make an argument that 2 women fighting not for a title, but for contendership to a title that actually means something, because there aren't 4 of them floating around, or 6 of them, counting NXT, in the women's division, that a contendership match means more if everybody's fighting for one world title instead of one of 4 singles titles between Raw and SmackDown. So, like I said, it's not an enthusiastic endorsement of it, but I'm also not all up in arms, because I do think, as Derek said, there's more women in the NXT pipeline. It's a vote of confidence in the women. And the IC and US titles have been good for giving someone like Braun Breaker, an opportunity. And LA Knight, LA Knight's kind of going to be an upper mid-card, top of the second tier guy. That's, some people disagree, but I think that's his natural water level. And Braun Breaker is another example of a guy on the rise, and the IC title reign is symbolic of him you imagine him as a champion. He looks really good as a champ eventually, and same with Gunther. You end up with a more important title. So it can be used in two different ways, and that can be an effective booking tool in the women's division also, which hasn't existed. So, like I said, not enthusiastic, but I'm okay with it, and it's just the key is in the execution.
Yeah.
Darrell says, I want to see a strong lineup for the IC women's title because Raw's secondary women, and then he trailed off. I don't know what he's meant to say, but the depth of the women, I'm interested to see what the brackets are like on the Raw side of things. So yeah. But a Milano 20 says, yeah, adding two women's titles at the same time doesn't make sense to me. Barely had both women's titles featured. I guess I just would disagree with that, Javier, because it makes sense in the sense that if there's going to be one, there might as well be two. If you only introduce one and the secondary title floats, I don't know. There's something about that doesn't make as much sense as just giving each brand their own damn secondary women's title. Javier?
Yeah. And I mean, and it's when they expand, I'm pretty sure we're going to get more people from NXT to show up in terms of the depth for Raw. I could see someone like a Kairi Sane maybe hold be the first one. That way you have an established star that's someone coming up from NXT, acting as a gatekeeper for whoever comes in from NXT to challenge for the title, that kind of thing. We'll probably see more movement of that, when we get closer to the Netflix thing.
Yep. More chat comments too. Glenn B says, don't forget, we still have Charlotte Flair and Becky to come back. Asuka, Vakir, Julia. I mean, there's a lot of up and coming talent, and up and coming and returning talent at depth. And frankly, if they get at full strength with, say, Becky and Charlotte, and is there anyone else out injured right now from the main roster who I'm forgetting? But if they get everybody back full strength, because Dakota Kai's back, but if they get everybody back and then add a few key women from NXT, I mean, honestly, the women can be 50% of Raw and 50% of SmackDown if they want them to be. And, it's been a long march to get here, maybe 15 years, but the day that I don't think it's happened yet, and certainly not regularly if there was a fluke week or an outlier, where women's segments on both Raw and SmackDown clock more time than the men's matches and segments. And I think there's a possibility of that in 2025 with these secondary titles and adding roster depth. And I don't see any good reason not to aim for that, Javier. I mean, you don't force it. Sometimes the men are going to be more compelling and the men's roster, but other times the women's kind of should be too if you're doing your job. And if so, don't say, well, 30% of the match, 3 out of 10 matches on TV will be women's, or 3 out of 10 segments. You can do 6 out of 10 every once in a while too.
Yeah, I mean, whatever makes sense for the time.
Yep. Javier, I need longer answers from you because I can't even inhale after my long answers and get ready for my next.
We'll get there. You're making the points. What do you want me to tell you?
So I'll throw to you and leave some points on the table. I'm like, oh, that was long. Let me take a breath and recover. And then Javier was done 3 seconds before I exhale. Standard Deviation says they were committed to one secondary title. Once they needed to introduce another one. Otherwise, technically, the U.S. title would have been more prestigious than both world titles due to a larger talent pool. Sure. Good point. Derek Mitchell says, I'm a tad bit concerned with all the titles in general, but having 2 secondary women's titles and a speed champion, it's starting to look a bit like AEW with 20 titles. The speed title, fortunately, is just, it's not really part of the ecosystem. It's less than the FTW title was. So that in and of itself, it doesn't bother me.
My brother and I talked about it on acknowledging WWE, and I thought about, between the 3 brands in WWE, but why doesn't it feel as bad to me? I think it's because the titles are defended on their brands, and they each represent something specific. The big issue I have with the AEW titles is mainly with the fact that you have essentially what's 3 intercontinental titles on one brand. Plus, they're also defending usually the RH titles every now and then get thrown into the mix too. And then you have the stuff that are titles but not titles, like the Diamond Ring, which granted I haven't done in a while. The Owen Cup stuff, and a lot of that other stuff without so you don't know what's the meaning of each one, as opposed to in the WWE you have the Intercontinental US is the your gatekeeper title for the most part, and then you have your championship, which a plus side is that it's not being defended on the TV show. So then your main events have been the IC, and like you said, Wade, it's like the TV title kind of same kind of like feel to it. So
Yep. Okay, very good. Sadler version 3 says NXT women have dominated that show for like the last 2 years. So there's a good case study for that. And yeah, I mean, NXT is very heavy in the women's division. And Derek Hubbard even adds that it feels like the women in NXT often get the majority of the time on weekly TV. Moreover, they earn the time, and that's a key. I mean, it's not charity. It's not, just going, we're going to be halvesies for halvesies' sake to seem, progressive or whatever. I mean, it's just, this has been a project, and if the talent isn't healthy or a bunch of people get injured, the ratio will swing to the men. But if a bunch of key men get injured, the ratio could swing to the women, and that's fine. I mean, as Glenn B says in the chat, you could argue at various points Becky and Ripley have been as popular as most male WWE stars. WWE knows how to book its women strong, in my opinion. They won't fail here. I mean, Becky was getting bigger pops than anybody for a little while. That's tapered off. Rhea Ripley, I mean, Javier, she's getting bigger pops than anybody right now. I mean, her music, and she comes out. Honestly, I mean, you could say, oh, maybe CM Punk, maybe Jey Uso, maybe Cody Rhodes, but I mean, I would bet if you held up a decimeter or a decibel reader, I bet Rhea's getting the biggest pops right now at most live events compared to the men.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that everybody's into the product right now, so I think it really depends on the order that they come out from time to time. But yeah, she's definitely up there. I like the stuff she's doing with Liv Morgan, but that's kind of been going on for quite a bit. And I'd like to see, if she gets put into a program, say with Becky or Charlotte or something, that definitely is going to like elevate things to another level with her.
Yep. All right. Well, let's pause and formally introduce ourselves. We'll talk more about the women's secondary title and then get on to the other content on Raw. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Monday, November 25th, 2024. I am Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of the long-running Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter. By the way, issue number 1,900, just published online for our VIP members. It includes long-form reviews by the Torch team of AEW's Full Gear with 1 to 10 scores, my review, Alan Cunahan, Greg Parks, Sean Radican, Rich Fan, all with our written reviews of that show, my match report included in that. Greg Parks reviewing the WWE draft from 6 months ago in a feature column, and more. So go VIP, PWTorch.com/GoVIP gets you the full information on becoming a VIP member. A full VIP membership gets you access to our newsletter every week and also our previous over 1,800 back issues. We just published number 1,900 this week, today, in fact. But you can browse the archives going back to the late 1980s, Torch Talk interviews, cover stories, pay-per-view reviews, star ratings, editorials, backstage news tidbits, all the stuff you hear Conrad review with Eric Bischoff and all his people all the time. You can read them yourself. If you are a VIP member, we give you the 20 years ago back issue and the new back issue every week as a Patreon supporter too at our top tier there. But full details on subscribing through Patreon, through Spotify, through Apple Podcasts, using your Apple account, or full VIP membership with credit card, debit card, or PayPal at PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Give you lots of ways to enjoy VIP benefits with different tiers and different pricing and different sort of ecosystems and formats. Again, all at PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Gift yourself a subscription before you buy others' gifts. Treat yourself first. Treat yourself to a PW Torch VIP membership. All right. So we're here to talk Raw, the final show before Survivor Series. And Javier Machado from PW Torch is my guest. He will be writing, if all goes well on this busy week, a Survivor Series pay-per-view primer with his recap of the feuds, analysis of the hype, and predictions. Javier, I didn't tally it up, but how did you do with Full Gear, do you think, in terms of your predictions?
I'm going to have to go over it because I usually forget about it like minutes after I did it. You give me 10 minutes to think about it. I change my mind. I'll think myself.
It is one of those. Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, I mean, I know I was happily wrong with Jay White winning. So that yep. One I know I was wrong with that one. So I was happily wrong with that one. But and they did a really good job also with the Ospreay Fletcher one, because that one also I got that one wrong too. And I'm glad the way I got it wrong. And some stuff was really good. AEW is so frustrating for me though.
Why?
Because it's particularly writing the primer, because like the build to the stuff when I write it out and I'm like, oh, okay, well, this all worked really well. It's not really coming across on the Dynamite TV show. the way that they build their stories is just not, for me, coming out like the way you want to. And I think it's mainly because every segment feels like it's just as important as the other. Unlike, here, in WWE, they signpost which are the most important segments. You say it all the time, Wade. The most important thing to walk away with, the two most important things to walk away with. If you remember anything else on the show, gravy. And I think that's kind of the thing, like when the Jericho stuff that he's doing is just as important as the Moxley, hell, they're saying the story there is that Moxley's trying to reshape AEW, and all we get is from the geeks, basically, side of the things. What about the rest of the roster? What does Swerve think about that? What does Paige think about that? What does Jay White? What does everybody else? So everything's like siloed in its own little universe. We used to call it the
Codyverse.
Codyverse, and it's like everybody's like in their own little universe. So if nobody cares about the AEW being changed, in the roster, why should I?
Yeah. Nope. Good point. We cover a good amount of that in our roundtable written reviews and scores and newsletter this week. We also put it up as a article. You don't have to read the newsletter if you don't want. If you just want to read the article, it's on the VIP website too. But we're here to talk Raw, and you can participate in the chat. If you're watching us live on YouTube, hello, thank you for contributing to the show. You guys keep us on our toes and add good points and respond to what we're saying in real time. It's been a fun addition after our shift from Blog Talk Radio to YouTube earlier this year. And we also invite you to email the show, especially if you aren't able to watch us live and be in the chat, but you want to contribute a thought or questions or comments or rants. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. You can also be a video caller or audio-only caller as a VIP member or Patreon supporter. We put a link up on our Patreon supporters page and also in my TV reports at PWTorchVIP.com with the link to be a video caller. So that's another perk of being a VIP member, and we invite you to join us live. I think that's it from the blog department. Check out my TV reports at PWTorch.com. VIP members get the ad-free version. It's loads a lot quicker. It's a lot cleaner. PWTorchVIP.com. Another perk with VIP membership. All right, let's get back to the chat and a couple other comments about the women's title, and then I want to talk about New Day. We're not doing things necessarily in a specific order, but I thought we had news there in terms of how heated things got and the way that played out. So first couple more comments here on the women's situation. Ken Arnold says we'll probably see 5 women's matches at WrestleMania in April. The 2 world titles, the secondary, and the tag titles. Hopefully no going overboard with multi-person matches. There would not have been room, Javier, and there isn't in AEW really, for as many titles as there are to be defended on pay-per-views, PLEs. And that's when they feel prestigious, when there's a crescendo of a big-name challenger up against a champion, with the payoff being at the big stadium shows, the big branded shows. WWE can get away with it. 1, they run enough pay-per-views to kind of rotate, but 2, they're really big shows like WrestleMania and SummerSlam are now going to be 2 nights. And Ken Arnold brings that up. There should be at least 5 matches now between the 2 nights at WrestleMania. And I'm for that, and you don't have to have a title to have a match on WrestleMania if you're a woman either. So there might even be 6. How do you feel about that?
No, you got off suddenly.
How do you feel about that? I'll keep my cadence more normal.
That's what threw me off. Usually,
if Joe Tessitore was here, you'd be really thrown off by the way that he ask questions of Wade Barrett.
If you have special attractions too, if you have another match with Trish Stratus and stuff like that, you could have multiple. And the thing is, on the plus side, it'll give some women that are not like on the Becky Lynch, Rhea Ripley, I would say at this level. They'll be main eventing some of these shows when they're defending they're defending the IC titles and those two, which. In some way, it's prestigious to be at WrestleMania and all those stuff, but it also really helps getting a lot of TV exposure too. So,
Derek Mitchell points out, I'm an old school fan. It feels like Starrcade '83, where everyone literally had a title belt on the show. It is, we give AEW a hard time.
Wrestle Kingdom's like that too. Wrestle Kingdom is 30 belts on that show too. So
but just because it was done before and you have fond memories doesn't mean it's the best. Or even a good approach to take in the modern era. You just have to judge it based on the era. But I think WWE with 2 separate shows, 2 separate rosters, 3 hours at a time, 2 night pay-per-views for SummerSlam and WrestleMania. I don't know if we're far from Rumble being 2 nights with the men's Rumble on one night and the women's on the other. And I mean, they are, if we think they're making a lot of money off of having these events, 2 nights, they're making even more money by making wrestlers pay for their own tickets for their family and friends now, Javier. I don't know if you saw that story.
Really?
Yeah, Fightful reported that. I checked with people in WWE, and they go, yeah, they're being really stingy as far as giving away tickets. And now wrestlers have to buy. They're being sent to when they request tickets, they're being sent to a website to buy tickets. So I think that's lame. I mean, I don't know if the full details, maybe wrestlers are abusing it. I think a policy of, if it's your hometown, it's not just a random town with some old college friends, but it's, you get a couple times a year, you can ask for, 4 or 6 tickets, but come on, give some sort of allotment. This is like, it's not, I don't know, it's different, but similar to when John Laurinaitis took over for Jim Ross as executive or as VP of talent relations 20 years ago and instituted the dress code, and wrestlers had to show up at the arena in the suits because the NBA was doing it and was changing the image of the NBA. So WWE wanted to do it. They wanted wrestlers representing at airports and hotels and to staff workers and looking the part, feeling more professional. But it was a pain in the ass because these guys go to the gym, they got bags, they got to work out. There was a real pushback then. I'm curious if there's a pushback here, but I mean, they're making more money than they ever have, but it still sort of sucks to be told, no, we don't have 6 tickets to spare for your mother and mother-in-law and 2 nieces. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, if they have like if they have like a section like for 6 seats and then just rotate the families out and have like a room in the back where they're watching the rest of the show on TV or something like that.
Yeah.
You could do it because if it's a family thing, that should be something that should be workable. If it's that they want to sit down and watch the entire show, then I understand that, okay, pay for your tickets.
But I mean, just there's a Raw in Glendale and somebody who has family there, they can't spare 6 tickets. I mean, the arena holds 90,000 people, 13,000
I'm thinking like there. WrestleMania pay-per-views. So.
Yeah, but this is like, this is just anything. Like, even if they had, 11, 12,000 tonight in Glendale. Yeah. And if you are, my understanding is if you want your mom or your husband or your niece to go, you got to buy a ticket now. You can't get one of those many, many thousands of empty seats in that arena. So I don't know. I mean, I'll dig more into the policy, but I confirmed the report today that's a thing. So anyway, they're doing very good business. They're not making that much extra because they're charging wrestlers for tickets. I'm being facetious when I say that, but I don't know. But like I said, wrestlers are getting paid more than ever, so they honestly they can't afford it. It's just weird. It seems like charging employees for straws at a restaurant if they have a drink on their break or whatever. It's just like it feels just small. So I wanted to draw attention to that because we give WWE a lot of good press for a lot of, I don't know if good press is a word, but they're doing a lot of things well and avoiding controversy in a lot of ways and just selling out and Netflix Association and all this stuff. And it's like, I hope that policy doesn't last or is augmented with some latitude to not be abused, but let people a couple times a year get 6 comp tickets or something. Okay. Back to the main topic. Matt Krause says the secondary titles aren't needed, but they give the women who aren't on the level of the main eventers something to feud for, which is welcome because sometimes feuds seem meaningless. So, Javier, I've made this point a couple times on this show. How do you feel about that? Like, he's saying a title makes that feud seem meaningless and a title gives it meaning. Certainly that's part of Tony Khan's approach, which is why we got, an international title shot, a TNT title shot, a tag team title shot, a world title shot, a women's title shot. But eventually it just when Takeshita came out, I was like, is he Continental? No, that's Okada. Did he beat Okada for the Continental? And then I'm like, oh, that's right. There's an international title I completely forgot about because it's not featured on TV and there's so many belts it's hard to keep track of. You have diminishing value the more belts you have. It's like Econ 101. Inflation, people go, oh, you have debt in your country, just print up a bunch of money and pay it off. But by definition, that lowers the value of a dollar if there's more floating out there. Titles work the same way. So I make the case against it. I think there's, a realm of reasonable middle ground with some overlap in terms of what the ideal number of titles are. But do you agree with Matt that the women, specifically speaking, WWE's had trouble making non-title women's matches feel relevant outside of, say, tonight where there was a stake, which is who gets the advantage?
I think part of the problem with that is that they haven't really built many feuds that are outside. They've done a few that have been interesting. I mean, I'm going to go far back, but for some reason was in my mind was the Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. That was a blow up between the two. There was that was interesting. Everyone would see it. Unfortunately, the whole thing with Sonya Deville happened, and that we never saw payoff of that. But which was the hair versus hair match. That's why I remember it, because that wasn't a thing I was reading. That was supposed to end in a hair versus hair match, and that was intriguing. But I think what ended up happening is you ended up with Shotzi. I remember Shotzi Blackheart. They would put her in a lot of programs, and they weren't working out. And I think they got gun shy over that. I think having a title acts as a crutch. You don't need it, but it's a crutch, so it helps when you need to book something next week. I mean, how many times now? I mean, we've seen Triple H whip out that crutch a few times where he's we're going to have a tournament. A triple threat, 4 triple threats. The winners are going to meet each other, and then the winner of that's going to face for the Intercontinental Tag Team, Women's Tag Team, or whatever one you have. And he basically just booked the next few weeks. So, it is a crutch. Normally, if this were more sports-like, it'd be just the wins and the losses that a win would catapult you closer to your goal. That's not really the feel of WWE. So I understand why they're going to go for a crutch. And, so again, I'm kind of mixed on that. I don't think he should do it, but it does help. But it's, you could be doing something better in its place. Now you're ready.
Yep. All right. Another comment here. Standard deviation: 1 and 3 women on the roster will either be carrying a belt or challenging at all times. When we consider the next in line challengers for each title, almost everyone is always within reach of a title. Some would say that's good. I think he doesn't mean it that way, Javier.
I'm assuming there are going to be more women inserted into this because, like it was mentioned, the NXT's women division has been, popping off, and I can see just an influx of talent from there. You just bring. We've already seen some, the Metaphor, the two from Metaphor, which we saw recently involved with the 4-way tag team. We're going to see a lot more of that, coming over. And I know that some of the people that are in NXT currently are established independent talents that they picked up. So, I think we're going to end up seeing how we had the Balors and the Shinsuke's and the, come over from NXT and make a name for themselves. I think we're going to be in line for the, Bakir and Julia's, when they come over too. So I now it seems low, but I think, like I said, it's going to probably, we'll have a better view of things once we hit the 3-hour Raws and SmackDowns.
Do you have an early prediction, Javier, on who wins the Intercontinental title, or do you have someone you'd like to see win?
No clue. I mean, the only one that came to mind that would be kind of on that level would be a Kairi Sane kind of person. I don't know what Asuka's situation is. I can see her be be someone who's a gatekeeper for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talking about the workhorse, part of it is just who do you want to see wrestle a lot on TV? Yeah, and Kairi can fit that. Yeah, so Kairi. I was thinking Natalya maybe just because Oh, yeah.
She, that was some. She said she'd been, but I don't know what side of the ledger she's on. But Natalya,
Yeah. Yep. I kind of like that because it'd be. I mean, it just seems like she'd be a good person to hold it and brag about it, and then lose it to somebody who holds it longer. But as a little kind of tip to Natalya, a tip of the hat, a gold watch, and she can work, and I think it'd give her something to fight for, which not being at a world title level for a while is it's it hasn't given her a lot to do, and be a nice. I don't know how many years more she plans to wrestle, but I think it could work as a nice. I think she'd be good in that role, and it'd be a nice gesture for her for all that she's meant for that women's division. Okay, let's a couple other quick comments here. Junaid says, if the women's IC title leads to more meaningful women's feuds and matches, and I'm all for it as long as this is the last championship WWE creates without eliminating any first. At least it has a purpose. Yeah, I mean, Javier, we say about AEW, too many titles, but what is the difference between the Continental and the International and the TNT? I mean, nothing.
That's been my issue. I mean, how you could make the same argument. What's the difference between the TBS and the Women's World Championship? because those two, sometimes the TBS Championship in AEW has been higher booked than the women's championship.
Yep. Derek Hubbard says, I seem to have some faith in Lyra Valkyria. I would pick Zoe Stark. Admittedly, I'm very biased. Junaid says Lyra Valkyria. And then we had a vote from Michael Gross for Zelina Vega. And Sadler says, yeah, Lyra's probably the favorite to win this. So there's some chat room answers for early candidates to go along with yours. I kind
of felt bad because I buried Lyra on my podcast.
Yeah.
And I always feel bad when I do that. I feel like guilty. But then Todd, I think on the Fix, was talking about the bird puns and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I feel vindicated.
Good. Standard Deviation says, I think there's about 40 women on the roster, so they would need a large influx to change the ratio. And yeah, so I think just looking at the chat, as always, you can super chat. You'll definitely make it onto the show if you super chat, because those get starred and set aside for us. Let's shift to the New Day situation. We had a love fest. I love you too. Let's put it in the past. We got our 10-year anniversary celebration next week. Everything is great. They get to the ring. The bell's about to ring, and they can't even rock, paper, scissors their way into deciding fairly who's going to start the match. Xavier wants to. Kofi wants to. Kofi wins out. Xavier immediately takes himself in, slaps Kofi on the back, and then loses in like a minute. And then it leads to an escalated argument between these two. From ringside all the way to the back, it was as heated, and it wasn't just like intense in tone. It was intense in terms of the personal shots that were taken. Kofi pulling out, Kofi lose. Xavier pointing out that, Kofi lost to Brock and let everybody down in 6 seconds, and Kofi going, there's a reason you haven't won a singles title. I mean, it was just like back and forth, like, between friends or people in a relationship or family members. There's places you don't go, until it's really the end. There's a certain 2, 3, 4 subjects you don't bring up, even no matter how mad you are. Well, they kind of went there. I mean, they didn't go into like, well, I don't cheat on my wife. It wasn't like that. But it walked right up to the line of things that are publicly known. I'm implying nothing by that, for the record. Javier, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, well, for my anime fans out there, they knew something was up when Kofi Kingston came out dressed as Goku, and Xavier Woods came out dressed as Goku Black, which is the evil version of Goku from another dimension. Long story, I'm not going to go into it. But that's the general thing. Evil Goku versus good Goku. You knew something was up. And yeah, sure enough, they basically just started nailing, below and I like the way it kind of escalated. And, Kofi was biting his tongue. But at the same time, like when I see an explosion like that, it's like, holy crap, Kofi, you've been holding this back and having had this conversation. I think ultimately neither of them look good in this.
I was going to say that. I felt like I liked both of them less by the end.
Yeah, and I mean, and sometimes you don't mean that stuff, but you're thinking about it. It's like, oh, is this what you really think? And, so, I mean, I think everybody's had some sort of blow up similar to that in their life with somebody, at some point, so it's something that's very understandable and relatable.
Yeah.
And then like we're going to see what happens, next week, see you at the wedding, so that's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how things turn out next week. I was on when the camera was following them to the back. I'm like, okay, so we're going to get like a Big E tease, or they're going to like turn the corner and Big E's standing there and they're going to cut away. And then like, they'll follow the story on later, because I'm sure that Big E's going to have some sort of role to play in this, either acting as the ultimate peacemaker, put them together. If he's good to go, maybe Xavier takes him out, in his frustration, so it'd be I'm very intrigued for what happens next week on Raw for the story. I mean, it's sure as hell took forever to get here, but they were shooting for a date and the date's finally here. So I'm definitely, I'm hooked.
Yes. The Big E factor, it makes this much more interesting, because it could. Well, whoever is mean to Big E is going to be the heel. I mean, tonight. I mean, there are times where I'm on Team Kofi. Xavier's got insecurities that are manifesting, and then, and obviously he was the jerk during the match. But then there's things Kofi's saying, and the way he's saying them that feels kind of nasty and mean. You're like, is Kofi like this off camera?
Well, because Xavier's saying that you're an elitist to Kofi, and then like he hits him back with like, well, I'm a champion, you're not, and you're just not good enough. So he's proving his point. And it kind of seems like, there are deep-seated issues that should be worked out in like therapy as opposed to in front of a camera in the WWE ring. Yeah. But, I'm really excited to see where this goes, if this is it for the group. And I tell you what, the acting between the two of them was great. They were really like, going for it, their emotions, it felt like raw emotion. It was very well done segment for me.
It's what was going on in the Timberwolves locker room after that Toronto game last week, where Julius Randle didn't pass to Gobert, and then Rudy Gobert took an intentional 3-second violation, and it was a turnover. The game was tied at that point. The Wolves ended up losing to a team that had only won 2 games this year, and then Julius proved a point to Gobert that that he's got, bad catching hands, and so he just rifled the ball to Gobert, and he didn't catch it, and then apparently there was a big blow up in the locker room. But nobody from the local Minnesota media flew to Toronto because newspapers are on tight budgets, and it sucked. And there was no local media to find out, but there were rumors that there was a Kofi Xavier exchange going on between those two new teammates. So yeah, I mean, you say stuff like this happens in real life. I mean, it probably something like this happened, in with them. Someone else I was thinking of that because it came up because L. Archer in the chat said 2 friends. Oh, wait, nope, that's not the quote. Derek, I'll go back to you, L. Archer. Derek Mitchell said, I'm an NBA fan. The New Day segments tonight reminded me of when Draymond Green called Kevin Durant the B word in 2018, 2019. Reset the biometer. And then Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert punched Kyle Anderson a couple years ago on the bench during a Wolves game. So yeah, this stuff happens. Sadler version 3 says, yeah, Wade, that Wolves play was hilarious. I'm surprised you guys lost to us. We're so bad. Yeah, the Wolves are figuring things out. The Wolves threw up a spoiler alert for everybody, anyone who's a Boston or Wolves fan, but yesterday the Wolves threw up a shot, Naz Reid, with a second left on the clock, and would have beat Boston in Boston, but the 3-point shot didn't go in. So we lost, but it was after one shot away from winning. Javier, do you care? Do you care about the NBA? I can't remember.
No, I mean, no, I'm not an NBA person. I followed during the LeBron, Bosh, and Wade era, just because it was it was a historical pairing kind of thing, and so I followed it briefly. I understand basketball, so I understand what you're referencing, but I'm not like into it.
Yeah. So here's L. Archer's point. 2 friends at a party get into a fight. Both tend to look like heels, even if someone is right. And so Junaid brings up an interesting point in that regard. What do you guys think of Kofi saying he was a Hall of Famer before New Day formed? That was a bold statement. I mean, I'd have to go back and kind of think about where Kofi was in terms of IC title reigns and accomplishments at that point. I mean, what does Hall of Famer mean? I mean, WWE puts a lot of people in there. So, there's sort of you get into the Hall of Fame, but are you an actual Hall of Famer? Not technically, but actually in terms of accomplishment. I don't know if Kofi was at that point, but I could imagine him in a fit of rage wanting to show up Xavier saying it, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. But I have to go back and look, like, what if his career ended then? Would he be, sort of the so-called first ballot Hall of Famer instead of, the secondary guy? What do you think, Javier?
Well, I think he was, from I remember back then, I think he had, if there's like a good hand Hall of Fame, which I think some good hands have been selected for the Hall of Fame, so I think he was on that level. Yeah. Now I think he has a little bit more cachet just because, now he's on the mysterious, well, no, not mysterious, something else, but he's on the, length and breadth of his, same Hall of Fame as like R-Truth.
Yeah. Let's bring up Sadler version 3. Did y'all like Kofi showing more bite this week? It made him seem tougher, but he loses the sympathy factor from the fans that I thought they were going for. I was just imagining all the like 11-year-olds who have followed them since they were 4 years old. Like if you're 14, you're probably not going to cry if New Day break up. Maybe 14 you would. By the time you're 17 or 18, hopefully you've realized they're lame and you've moved on, and you hide your New Day merchandise. But yeah, there's probably some 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds who grew up with New Day, and they're crying. It's like mom and dad fighting or something like that.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you think about it, yeah. I mean, some people, even 17, 20-year-olds, they've spent a lot of time with that group, and the way that it was just, what was that reference they just made in the last because one of the references Kofi made, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was the Hall of Famer thing. It also kind of felt bad, like, for Big E, because he said you guys came looking for me, so he kind of threw Big E into that too. So Big E catching some strays also. But yeah, I mean, I thought that overall it was just, it was raw, not pardon the pun, of the show.
So let's go back to Big E's role in this. Junaid says, I think Big E probably prevents a turn in New Day, but they're making such a big deal out of the celebration. I think there will be, if there is going to be a turn, it'll happen here. So that's the thing. This can go a couple main ways. One, Big E brings them together temporarily, but there's not a breakup yet. He's like, hey guys, and they and maybe they even coexist for a little while because Big E's going on the road with them. He's going to, coach them and make sure he can break ties so they don't turn into arguments and bickering. So that's, some variation of that's one approach. He brings them back together again, permanent or temporary. It'd be hard to imagine. They didn't do all this just to have Big E show up and go, hey guys, come on, let's get along. And then they get along and they never argue again. Like, that'd be, what a waste of time this whole story arc would be. But if it could be temporary. The other option is one of them turns on Big E. The shocking turn would be Kofi attacking Big E to turn heel, because Xavier has been definitively more heelish than Kofi in totality. So my thinking is Xavier, slaps, insults, attacks, whatever, Big E, and that turns him firmly heel. Kofi comes to his defense, and then it's off to the races with those two. What do you think, Javier?
Yeah, well, I just remember what I was going to say earlier. It was when Xavier had said, when Kofi turned to Xavier and he said, oh, so you're going to get angry now. I thought that was like a thing where it's like, okay, you've been, nothing gets you angry and you're kind of coasting. I thought it was an important thing also. And I think that ultimately might be one of the, Big E shows up, gets them together, but New Day becomes a little bit less about the silly, and they actually, mission statement of, we were the best tag team. We need to become the best tag team again. And you do have a New Day change where they shed some of the more, the pancake throwing and stuff and that kind of stuff. And, become a serious team, and then, seriously go after the titles, and there's a change in the group. I think that's one of the ways you can do it. Otherwise, I could see the Kofi being the one who turns heel, because he's also the odd man out of that group. From everything I've heard, he's more, they're all friends, but he's the one who also has life outside of New Day, kind of thing. So, it could be, that could also be a dynamic there at play. So I could see that being another thing, particularly since the way that he went to Xavier's like, I'm the adult of this group. You guys came for me. I'm the adult. I'm the one guys who drug you here. So yeah, I mean, it could go multiple ways, and that's a swerve. I think that still would constitute a swerve. It's Kofi who turns heel. But it's one where you can see, in retrospect, granted, not retrospect because we're talking about it now, you can see where the evidence also leads towards that, because, it did start with Kofi looking like the bad friend, and, Xavier's, shots were were kind of true. And then, Xavier then started going over the top and doing cheating and more heelish stuff. And then, so it kind of felt like Xavier was like the pure heel there. And then we moved on to, now it's kind of a little bit, maybe he was right after all. And I think that's a great place to be, because again, what's going to happen next week? I don't have any strong feeling either way. I mean, I'm not even sure if they're really going to break up. Like I said, they could, Big E talk some sense into them, and we got to put away childish things and act our age and go after the titles, because that's what's going to solidify our what we're doing. So
Thank you. Junaid says Kofi Xavier is the cliff's edge of a relationship, according to Joe Tessitore. What a fantastic segment with Xavier taking credit for Kofi's success and Kofi pointing out Xavier's shortcomings. I think that their blow up was maybe the highlight of the show and was so realistic and layered and honoring history with minor retcons. And it sets Xavier up as a heel who you can still relate to. It's kind of like, Kevin Owens. They want Kevin Owens to be the heel that you can relate to. I think that's what they're going for in AEW with Jon Moxley, but I think we relate to him too much. Even on the pre-show, Jeff Jarrett, in the panel we're talking, and they throw to Jeff Jarrett about this, and he's like, well, Moxley just kind of wants what's best for AEW. The AEW he remembers when it formed. And then you could just see him like churning in his head, like, wait, this makes no sense. Why is he a heel? And then he had to try to like adjust his comments on the pre-show. But it's, then it goes back to think, but he says these really he says these things that everyone nods along to and agrees with, but he does in kind of a mean way. So we're supposed to boo him. Like, it's hard to make sense of it. With Kevin Owens and Xavier, you want to believe that they believe they're just. And I think we've clearly have enough material that Xavier has said where you could understand him thinking he's just. The lens through which he sees what's happened seems you can accept that he sees it that way. He's not just gaslighting or openly lying. He does feel slighted, but we also know it's out of insecurity and perhaps the truth that he's not as good as Big E and Kofi, and maybe he needs to just accept that and take accountability for it and not sabotage Kofi and insult Kofi in the meantime. And that's what's gonna ultimately make him a heel, is the fans thinking he's good but he's not as good as he wanted to be, and now he's taking it out on his partners who are a little bit better than him. I mean, big thing about a heel, the definition of a heel in pro wrestling in part is they can't achieve the success that they want honestly and fairly, so they cheat. In order to try to get ahead. I mean, nobody likes people like that in life. Well, some people do, but in fact, a lot of people voted for people like that. But in lots of elections that happens actually. But overall, yeah, this is a case where I think fans are going, Kofi makes some points, but man, I can't be on his side the way he's handling all this. Okay. Man, lots of comments in the chat on this. Standard Deviation said, I enjoyed tonight's Xavier Woods promo. Wait, let me reread that sentence. Exactly. A good comment there. And there's one other I thought of bringing up. Anyway, Ken Arnold was saying, I'm really curious as to who turns, Kofi or Xavier. They've set up where you don't really know going into next Monday, especially after that heated exchange and things finally boiling over. I mean, we covered that. I mean, I think Kofi could turn heel, but I mean, Xavier's been the one who all along, including in this match, was just petulant and, I made the call, you do it. I mean, who's going to ultimately the scales are much more on the side of siding with Kofi. All right. Let's move to the next topic. Well, Derek just said if New Day breaks up, it'll be one of the few tag teams that have been together this long that haven't been broken up, and that makes it more newsworthy, Javier, when you don't turn and break up teams all the time, and you can hang on as long as they have. It makes a breakup newsworthy enough for us to talk about it for a half hour on a show like this. I mean, it has been played out. This is another example of Paul Levesque's long-term booking too. It's been simmering and they've, revved it up. They had, the Odyssey Jones thing kind of throw a little wrench into things, but they've recovered well. Standard Deviation said they tore each other down, but I liked how each of their strengths compensates for the other one's flaws. That's what makes them a stronger team than individuals, which might be the point Big E makes next week, Javier. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So let's move on to another topic. First, we talked about the ticket thing earlier, and we had some insight from the chat room that I noticed. So let me bring that up because there are some good points made here. Ken Arnold says, I think the NFL, MLB, and NBA teams do the same thing as WWE when it comes to family and friends ticket giveaways. Now there's like 14 people plus assistant coach, like 20. There's like 40 people, not counting backstage workers and stuff at every NBA game. And so, that's a lot on a typical wrestling show. There's 8 matches, so 20 wrestlers plus referees. I mean, I don't know. I think there might be a difference there. But Ken points out too, they fine NFL players if they go past a certain threshold during those post-game jersey swaps. And Glenn B said there have been reports for months now that WWE weren't giving away free tickets to any employees, family, etc., because they were selling everything. Yeah, I mean, you should basically, if you want to get a free ticket, it should be, show up at the arena with your ID and say who you're with and, come in. I don't know. I guess logistically that's a challenge, but it does suck if people are doing that and they ruined it for everyone else. And that did cross my mind too. But there is, I know there's systems out there. I don't know if WWE has implemented it where you get the ticket on your phone and it only works on your phone and you need to be there and you can't resell it. So anyway, but people pointing out that there's some mitigating factors here. Sadler version 3 said Endeavor is stingy with tickets for UFC fighters too. They even kick fighters out of the arena after their fights. Like they can't watch the main event. They got to leave or go buy a ticket. Imagine that. Imagine being the middleweight champion and defending your title and then being kicked out of the arena after your shower. And then you go to the box office and have to spend, $500 to go watch the main event. Wow. So anyway, some interesting insights into that. And I did caveat a little bit. I think it'd be nice to have an allotment for everybody per year to be used and try to, prevent them from selling it, check on who's actually sitting in the seats. But beyond that, there are mitigating factors in logistics that might sway us from thinking this is stingy and mean. And as I said, wrestlers earn enough money they can buy their niece tickets if they need it. Sadler says they do get kicked out of after they do media in the shower. That's wild. Okay. So other news on the show. We had the Damian Priest Gunther segment, Javier, that kicked off the show. I am just shocked that I still care this much about Damian Priest as a world title contender. And Gunther is a compelling character who already they've added this dimension to. I think from a booking standpoint, it's really interesting that WWE does what I talk a lot about, which is if you have a match where you don't want to do a clean finish and you have and you do a brave finish where somebody wins and somebody loses in a match, you're like, man, someone's going to get hurt if they lose. And then you turn that into a story, which is what they're doing here. That Gunther's lost some of that arrogance, some of that edge to him and in his body language, and then Priest seizes on it and beats him up. I think you can win by booking a clean loss for a top star like Gunther. And I hang a lantern on it, lean into it. Don't run from it. Don't do an unclean finish. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Now that the match is over, own it and turn it into a part of a storyline. And I think they've done a nice job with that. What do you think?
Yeah, and one of the first things I noticed was Gunther's, like you said, body language during that segment, how he was retreating constantly from Priest's attacks. And he was just, on a constant, retreat, constantly self-doubting himself. I like the story. It's, granted, this is normally what you would see in a more babyface story. The protagonist of the story does seem to be Gunther, and with the antagonist being Priest, which I think is really interesting and good for Priest too, because he's playing a different role. Granted, this means that since it's Gunther's story of like self-discovery. Some of those are the best stories. Like, I read a lot of comics. They would do a storyline where the big bad guy is defeated, and then there's like a solo, like a 6-issue or 4 or 6-issue storyline where it's the villain getting his mojo back and usually finding like a new power and a new power level. And this feels like what they're doing with Gunther. And Gunther's going to get his confidence back. Maybe he might lose. He might even lose, and there'll be a period of time where and he has to rebuild himself back up to the level that he was before. Or, he just rediscovers himself in that match. And then the Gunther that we get after that's going to be just a monster following that, which precludes, because I thought that Balor was getting involved in the match. I'm like, it precludes Balor getting involved in the match. I hope it doesn't, because then then you don't serve any masters if you get like a screwy finish that way. But yeah, and because Balor's in the area, I could see now, I'm writing the primer in my head. I could see Priest actually win it, and then just because of that puts Priest and Balor coming after the championship, and that would elevate that feud, not because the title needs to be involved, but because Balor never really had a real shot at winning back the title that he lost. No, they lose that he had to drop because his injury. Mm-hmm. So. And while you're telling that story, you tell the story on the other side of Gunther working himself back up, maybe working himself back up to the Royal Rumble. Maybe he wins the Royal Rumble, and he's the Royal Rumble winner who challenges for the Raw title.
Yep. Another comment, Junaid adds, Damian Priest is so cool at the moment. In the Street King versus Ring General dichotomy is really well done, even if I still don't 100% buy that Gunther is so afraid, but that's a minor nitpick. Yeah, I don't think Gunther's afraid. I think he's a little shaken. Just, there's a pedestal he put himself on that his, upbringing made him think he had this sort of right to, and Cody beating him, threw that off. And that's a human story. We don't have to like him to relate to what he's going through. Yeah. Derek Mitchell says Gunther is a strong world title holder and Damian Priest has really improved, but respectfully, this angle hasn't held my interest at all. All right. To each their own. Kevin, that's weird, says, I don't like this rattled version of Gunther. It's great for Priest, but not great for Gunther's presence. But Javier, you kind of covered that. I mean, if this is a journey to even a more dangerous Gunther, when that bell rings, it could be the end of Priest, as this could be not Brock Kofi, but Gunther could snap and Priest is not going to be a top guy. They're getting more out of him than we expected for longer, and he's done great. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Gunther just plows through Priest, and it just, they play into it, and then something snaps, or he just seems more fierce than he did before. There's different things you can do with this, and that's why I like this, because frankly, a Gunther Priest rematch, if you're sitting down in the booking room going, how do we make this interesting? You can do some generic interviews with Gunther insulting Priest and Priest saying, whatever, you can do the pipe angle and, I'm the king of the streets and stuff. But a dimension of Gunther being a little rattled, add some vulnerability to him. And I think that's something that was missing from the Orange Cassidy-Moxley storyline that led into Full Gear. There wasn't a sense of Cassidy being a potential winner. It took him 12 minutes to beat Wheeler Yuta, and he got beat up most of the match. I think Orange should have plowed through Wheeler Yuta and showed an intensity that shook Moxley to the core on the final Dynamite going into Full Gear. We got a version of that with Gunther looking shaken and rattled. So, it adds a little bit of doubt. And Derek Mitchell says, it's held my interest. It's good to see different variations of Gunther. Kevin, that's weird, says, yeah, Gunther's going to be held guilty of manslaughter on Priest. So anyway. All right, let's bring our first caller here, Rivers, into our discussion, Javier. Rivers, welcome. Good to hear from you. What is on your mind about Raw tonight? Thanks for holding.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Javier, I think this is the first time we've spoken. I'm a big fan. So it's a pleasure to speak to you, my man.
Why are you a fan of Javier? Get specific. What should he swell his chest out with pride over?
He has a very soothing voice.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's not on my top 5 list. No insult. There's 5 things I like about Javier more than a soothing voice, but
he has a nice beard as well. No, I know, I can see him on
that's
a regular
number 7.
basis.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
What? That means there's 5 things I like about you more than what Rivers likes you for. So that's anyway, go ahead.
Speaking of the Cody Gunther match, I don't think it's conspiratorial to think that maybe someone in the Saudi regime can influence who wins a match. I don't think that's totally out there. Do you think WWE had this planned? Because to me, it makes way more sense to have Cody lose because he's got other bigger things to deal with. And it played into Gunther's kind of dominant run for him to just have another belt that, we wouldn't see a week after, but he could just hold it up. Do you think that they are playing kind of make good and are trying to make it make sense? Or do you think this is something that they planned at least a couple of weeks outside of Crown Jewel?
Yeah, what do you think, Javier?
I think they would probably, because I'm trying to put myself back in that time. It was one of those where it felt that there was a no-win. It was like the Kobayashi Maru. It was a no-win scenario because I think you really need to keep Cody really strong because he is competing on his brand with the Bloodline storyline. So I think that was very important for him to be strong for that reason. And at the same time, I think that Gunther should have been a super villain, just destroying every opponent for the next 2 years, like he's done with every title he's held. So I was also kind of like, but I think that, the telling of the story that they found, coming out of this, starting with the post Saudi show interview that he gave, where it was Ludwig Kaiser was bad mouthing Cody. So no, he won this, and starting from that, it was just a thing where okay, so Gunther is he's in his own head, which again, it's a relatable sports analogy where when a pitcher gets the yips, that's kind of what they're doing with Gunther. He's not not as confident. When basketball, when a normal person who's automatic at the free throw starts just bricking everything. Mm-hmm. I think it's you could have told the same kind of story with Cody, but not when he's on. You can't say, oh well, he's doubting himself over on the SmackDown brand when you have Roman Reigns and the Bloodline stuff going on there too, because then. Again, I think you want to keep Cody as strong as possible for the big WrestleMania, for the big money matches against The Rock and against, likely a sequel with Roman. So,
right. I guess it makes sense because Cody's opponents are kind of coming at him. So it makes sense if you wanted more of an internal struggle story to put that on Gunther.
Yeah, and it helps with Gunther because it's I think the progression of people for him to bring down, which I don't think there's that many on. I'd have to do the math and check the roster. I don't think that there's that many on Raw. That make intriguing fights for him right now at the moment. Because it's because Seth Rollins and McIntyre's a heel when we last saw him, and a couple, but they're all involved in their own stuff. So yeah, I think I'm pretty sure they had at least something in mind, and I think that they ended up in a good position for this right now.
Going back to the female added titles, the criticism of it seems to be that it's adding to the noise and it just kind of clutters things. But in my opinion, it adds structure to that division. WWE's never been very good at having kind of structure. I think a wrestler should come out and kind of declare their intention for a certain division or title. Like, I know that isn't popular and I know that isn't going to happen, but they do kind of have, in theory, divisions. And if you think of any wrestler, you would think of a title. Like Dolph Ziggler, he was a world champion, but you think of him as like an IC division wrestler, probably. And I think by adding these titles to the women's division, it solves the problem of you're either in the championship contention or you're everyone else. I think if you do add these titles, it does add not an official kind of division system, but it does add the idea of these wrestlers at IC or US level, and then you go up and you have these world-class, world title heavyweight level. Just as it would be weird if, 10 years ago, Undertaker had the IC belt. There's nothing stopping it, but it just didn't make sense. So I think it should add structure if WWE do it correctly.
Rivers, I'll say, I'm with you on that. I have often said over the years, if not decades, I think like wrestlers should declare themselves IC title contenders, or if they want to leave the division, they should declare it, and then they can't work IC title matches. Or another way to do it is, you can't win the IC title if you have been in a world title match at any point in the last 3 years. Just arbitrarily grabbing a number there, somewhat arbitrarily. But it doesn't have to be exactly that. And so then wrestlers could kind of be like, yeah, I guess I'm ready to move up to world title contention and give up my dreams of winning or regaining the IC title. And you sort of declare, it's like declaring yourself eligible for the NBA if you're in college. Just something, it's like you lose your eligibility for the IC title. But when a certain amount of time goes by after a world title shot, you get to re-enter the title picture. And I think there's some intrigue in that because you can have a talking point. Tessa Torrico can say, it's been, 2.5 years since wrestler Y has had a shot at the world title. Are they going to wait out the last 6 months and go and try to take over the IC title reign now that they've been stopped short of the world title? Or are they going to try to work their way back to the world title? There's a story you can tell there. It adds another dimension. it's a level of detail a lot of bookers don't want to deal with because it can handcuff you a little bit. A lot of bookers just want total freedom to do what they want. That's why the rankings in AEW didn't work, as we predicted and everybody predicted through learning from history was going to happen. You get excited about the concept, but you don't think it through, and then you, as a booker, you feel handcuffed by it, and you don't like social media criticism. Why is the number 4 contender getting a shot before the number 2 contender? So it's not, some things aren't practical, but I think that would be somewhat practical to add that structure, and you could do that with the women starting off, just going. If you want to be in considered for a world title shot, you have to declare yourself ineligible for the US or IC title, and then there's a clear delineation between the two.
I think that should definitely happen for tag teams. I think you should have to kayfabe go get a tag team license.
Interesting, yeah.
And then you cannot be in a singles match, and I think it would make for a better tag team division. Just one more thing on the women's division. I'm putting it out there right now. My female MVP is Nia Jax.
I knew you were going to say that.
Now,
because she is.
I know she gets a lot of hate, and I don't know if
less and less by the month.
Not from the fan club here, the other direction.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah.
I don't know if her being reckless is valid. Like, I don't have enough experience to be able to comment on that. But I think her mic work is good. She's really unlikable, and she is playing the character. And I think her in-ring style complements the division. I've always liked that big, immovable object, let's say. Kind of like, I only bring this person up because they share a finisher, but that Yokozuna sort of just other people can create movement and they're just a big powerhouse. I've always liked that style, and it's something different. And I think when she first came back, I assumed she was being brought back, built up, and then fed to Jade, maybe. But as she's stuck around, I think she deserved it more and more. And yeah, she's my female MVP this year for sure.
Javier, how are you feeling about that?
No, like I said, fan club here, she's done an excellent job. Would I say MVP? I would have put her MVP, but definitely most improved. Most improved player.
She'd be on my ballot. She'd be on my MVP ballot.
She's my top three. She's my top three. Is just Rhea Ripley's just a force of nature on her own.
But you can make an argument. Rhea's been injured too much, and Nia Jax's been this steady, available. Yeah. I mean,
I'm saying like 1A, 1B. So I'm not making that big of a decision, but definitely the most improved by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
She's definitely.
I think Rhea is probably the most valuable. Now I think about it, but I think she's been brought up by the people around her, like Dom, to be able to play off Dom. I think is a huge benefit of her. I think Nia Jax is kind of carrying the kind of Raw women's division right now, and I think that's something that she doesn't have the best people to kind of play off of.
Yeah.
So that's
Good
why
point.
I'd go with her over Rhea. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk more MVP in the post Saturday's main event era of 2014 when we were really closing in on the end of the year. Anything else, Rivers?
No, that's it. Pleasure to
Cool.
meet you guys. I will just listen. You have a good night.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your support on as a Patreon supporter. Cool. By the way, Javier, number one reason I like you will be kept. We'll save that. But also elsewhere in the top 5, Goku Dragon Ball Super reference. You're here for me on some of my gaps in pop culture, video game, whatever knowledge, and then another top 5 is your Wyatt. Your interest in really decoding Wyatt's, translating Spanish for me. Also, top 5 ahead of your beard and your voice. By the way, I like that about you. But like I said, number 1 is it's more in the wrestling analysis realm. I
appreciate that.
Than all these other things. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yes. But there's some things we all bring to the table that are our specialty that others aren't bringing, and you've got several of those things that I think people appreciate.
Perspective would be like number 1. That's what I always shoot for.
I think that is part of your wrestling analysis. I also don't think you go with the conventional. You don't go with conventional wisdom if you don't feel it. but you're not afraid to go with conventional wisdom if it's just to be difficult or anything either. Like, I also, I mean, I don't know if I've used up all 5, but somewhere in there, being a supporter of Austin Theory with me during the good times and the tough times is also, it's certainly top 10.
Yeah. I'm glad we at least hit on Nia Jax. I still have faith in Theory. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, that's the thing. It's the booking. Is he the most underutilized true small S superstar in this business in 2024, Javier? I say that facetiously, and you're
I'll be honest,
contemplating it.
I am kind of glad that he hasn't been on TV because I think time needs to wash away that stink. I think he could probably also help benefit with a strong stint on give him like end of the year next year, start on NXT, and give him something meaty to do in NXT, new look. I would also fix the look a little bit. Because I know that we're trying to do like a breakup between him and what's his name, but I don't think anybody's gonna care about that. Yeah, Grayson. I don't think anybody's gonna care about that. So
there will be a transitionary moment for Austin Theory when they decide, if they decide, and when they decide to give him a serious push. I mean, he's just a young guy. There's not room for him. He did comedy with The Way and NXT. He's playing off of Grayson Waller, not all that, in a similar realm that he's playing off of Grayson Waller as a bit of a lackey. It's not the foundation I'd be laying for him to be considered a serious athlete. And maybe they've, soured on him. Not because he's not as great as we ever said Javier, but just there's more even greater wrestlers leapfrogging him. We'll see. Kevin, that's weird, says, I like that. I was going to say Xavier. Javier has an unwavering love for board games. There's other people chiming in on what they like about you.
You can see it down back there. Andromeda's Edge. I just finished
playing
that the other day.
Yeah.
Table Hog.
Nice. I was trying to find another. Standard Deviation said, why am I saying Xavier? Javier is a good signpost translator.
We talked about it for like 20 minutes earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. So Javier is also a good signpost translator, says Standard Deviation. So chat room, talk about what you like about Javier, and we'll move on here.
Big head.
Yeah. Standard Deviation about Austin Theory says Theory was Vince's final protege on TV, so perhaps are there politics behind the scenes? Not that I've heard of. I mean, definitely, he got sort of the Drew McIntyre chosen one reputation, but he, it wasn't just Vince that like Theory and thought he had a lot of tools. I'm curious if they decide they want to do something with Theory in 2025, and I mean it's sort of a bit to talk about him so much, but I mean generally speaking, I think there's an upside to him, and I think he could be a top tier player for them. I think his matches are good. He's got a good look. He's good on promos. I'd want him to get better in all those categories, but a lot of wrestlers do when they're given the chance and better opponents and better writing.
He got worse on promos from when I remember him in the Indies, because he got that WWE acting WWE cadence that that they got around, everybody had around that era. So which a lot of some people still have it, but a lot of them are like beginning. I think that's the first thing he's got to get rid of.
Yeah, good, great observation. You've seen early enough work to know what's buried underneath some of the bad habits that WWE can form.
I've talked about it before, but like for the people who aren't aware, there was in Evolve, he was in a forever blood feud with Darby Allin kind of thing, which was great. I mean, it was the story of two up and comers, and Regal got involved because Regal said, "One of you two, you two are the future of wrestling." And that was what their feud was about. Was one of them was like, I'm a WWE guy, and the other guy's like, no, I'm the indie guy. And it was a fight between the two different personalities, and he was great in that role. Then The Way happened, and while he showed great comedic chops, and then that unfortunately that's what graduated, not the other cool dude.
Kevin, that's weird, says, I think they realize they have plenty of time with Austin Theory when the top guys age out, which a lot of them are on the verge of in the next 5 years. And that's the thing. I mean, you're not going to push Theory right now at the expense of Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn or AJ, or even AJ Styles for that matter. I mean, you're going to try to sneak in some stories with these. Randy Orton, they're late, and Theory's in a
Shinsuke,
pattern.
Sheamus.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. But it doesn't mean Theory won't regress or stall out, or that others won't leapfrog him. I mean, but we'll see. I don't know if John Cena can help, but he did do some damage. Maybe they can use him in 2025 to give Theory, little pep talk coaching session, steer him in the right direction. Glenn B in the chat says Cena killed Theory with the crowds, even though he lost to him. They need Waller to become hated and then turn on him and brutalize him. But, what do you think of Cena trying to fix what he broke? Saying, I see something in you, kid.
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how Cena, like I said, I think really just leave and repackage. I think is really the best route for him. Because I wouldn't really. I mean, maybe in the future, but not like that's not going to fix him tomorrow. Yep.
Fair enough. All right, let's go to an email as we'll keep an eye on the chat room. Chris Johnson has chimed in, said, I'm going to keep this short after a rough day. I'm not in a great place mentally. Well, Chris, sorry to hear that. Hopefully our show will, at least be an escape for you. Happens to all of us. Gunther and Priest promo was standard PLE building, all it needed to be for a match that won't be the focus of the event. I think it was a little more than standard PLE building. I mean, I thought Priest brought it and Gunther added a talking point for us, and I think the announcers did a good job. I think it was a little more than just rehashing talking points. They followed up on the attack backstage or the fight backstage, and I would grade a little bit better than just standard.
Yeah, they emphasized the work they've already done, so it wasn't like just let's hold it here. They did amp up a little bit what they had done and what we likely to expect for Survivor Series.
Yeah. Braun Breaker and Ludwig Kaiser was a fun match, but you knew it wouldn't have an ending, and I don't care about Sheamus enough to be into the story they're telling. It's fine, but I'd be into a Kaiser Breaker feud one-on-one. Good match. It's a match I wanted to see between these two. Frankly, I thought this would be a really good matchup. And it was, for 8-9 minutes or whatever. I can't remember exactly till the finish. I think savvy, astute WWE fans were preparing for the distinct possibility, if not likelihood, of Sheamus interfering before the finish.
Guarantee would be the word I would use.
I know. Preparing for the near inevitability of it. And we got it, and it set up a triple threat. I mean, I got to say, Adam Pearce delivering the news of the triple threat made me almost not mind it so much. He is so just disheveled and like angry at this chaos. He is the anti-chaos agent. He wants order. He wants just let's have structure. Let's announce a match. Let's have a promo segment. People stop fighting. It gets me in trouble with upper management. And
I love the way that he's like the exact opposite of Aldis, because Aldis almost he loves the chaos, but he's like the calm center of it.
Yep, that's a really good way to put it.
While Pierce wants the quiet, but it's just but there's just all this chaos around them. So I
that's a really good point.
I mean, I really thought that this year they were going to do they were finally get into it, and we would actually have a legitimate reason why to have Raw versus SmackDown. I'm actually kind of sad we did not get a Raw versus SmackDown Survivor Series style match. Where each of them choose 5 people, and because I'm legit disappointed in that.
I get what you're saying, but that is not one of the top 10 things I like about you, suggesting a brand supremacy one. After we're putting up some of our flashback shows and articles on the build.
Not even brand supremacy. It's just he's because they've been feuding. I don't like you. I just it would have been.
Well, back to the build. Adam Pearce just yelling, "You guys want to fight? I'm looking at all 3 of you triple threat Survivor Series, the full-throated grinding. I'm so frustrated. Just go beat each other up. I don't care." It is a little bit more fun.
Just do it where we're insured.
Kevin, that's weird. Yeah, Kevin, that's weird. Says Pierce removes glasses more dramatically than Dwight Schrute after LASIK. Nice Office reference there. Pierce and Nick Aldis are good. I like Nick Aldis talking about how he's trying to. He was supposed to be a distinctly different GM in his approach than Adam Pearce. It's really worked out well. I mean, they're both like prototypes of an ideal GM type authority figure. The one who doesn't back down from wrestlers and cower, and seems in control, and also is a little loose with the rules under certain circumstances. He's okay with it, but don't push it too far. Kind of like some NBA head coaches are different, have different approaches. Some are just like disheveled, wiping sweat and freaking out, and others are very calm in their suits, and stuff's going on in their head, and someone's going to be in trouble in the back, but they don't show emotion. You can also have different types of GMs, and it's one of the pleasant surprises of the past couple of years with WWE is how they finally got it right. That GM shouldn't be Mick Foley or Teddy Long. I mean, no shame on them for the roles they played, but the celebrity GM, Kurt Angle, Ric Flair, whatever, it's like Paul Heyman. No, the GM should be middle management guys, and they play these parts so well. Really enjoying that. All right. The War Raiders, Judgment Day, another decent match that you knew would have a bad finish. Those damn heels. Yeah. What'd you think of that, Javier? Do we need more clean finishes in WWE, or are you okay with most, but probably not all, but somewhat close to the ratio of, hey, we're here to draw emotions out of fans, tell stories. We're not a true sport, and interference and non-finishes are part of our formula, and we're going to make the best of it. I mean, obviously that's their defense of this.
Well, I mean, I separate them in two categories. One is where there's, the match doesn't happen. I don't like that. I was really, I was expecting it already for the Breaker match this week, but last week's, it was Sheamus. Sheamus can lose. So, so I was invested. I was expecting to actually probably get a finish for that. We're just going to get a finish, but no, I was invested in the match, and then the Kaiser came out and blew up the match, and I was disappointed in that. When there's a screw job finish where there's cheating and stuff like that, I just see that as a move. And it's a move that a wrestler does, but instead of it being a Death Rider, it's a Jimmy comes in with a crowbar and hits the guy over the head when the referee's not looking. It's not meant. So I don't get really upset at that. It's like, crap, we'll get them next time. But just like everything, if you do it every single match, again, be more, less obvious that you're just doing it because you're just, it gets a bit much, particularly when you talk about pay-per-views and stuff. And
you can't do outrage at a 10 out of 10 every time, but I think it's really important for the announcers to not just blow it off when the integrity of a match is ruined due to interference and distractions. You want Joe Tessitore's new, he's coming along. I like him in this role. But I want the announcers to seem upset that we didn't get to find out who the better wrestler was. I mean, if you chip away at the premise that the central key essential element of pro wrestling is not high spots, it's not blood, it's not cool ring entrances, it's not championship title changes, it's finding out who the best wrestler is. That has to be at the core. As damaged and chaotic as that can be, that has to be at the core, the mission of the people who put on these matches, a promoter, the GM, Paul Levesque, the entity. That has to be the main thing. And then because if you don't have that, nothing else really works. Then it's sort of like, people slam dunking a ball, but it's not part of a game, or a 3-point competition. You're not going to draw ratings for 3-point competitions in the NBA every night. It's about wins and losses that have meaning, that lead to seeding in the playoffs, and eventually wins and losses determining who the champion is. There has to be some posturing of ostensibly caring that there's some integrity to who wins and that there should be a winner, and that has to exist somewhere. As hard as it is to actually fully enforce, well, of course you don't fully enforce it. You take a lot of tools away from wrestling storytelling. But my point is, going full circle, you want the announcers to care. They should be at least the main play-by-play guy, but hopefully Wade Barrett and Corey Grace too. They should want to see who the better wrestler is, not just who's better at cheating. It's why I just hate the rules go out the window with triple threat matches. Someone cheats, disqualify him, it comes one-on-one. I mean, the whole rule is designed to just avoid extra people doing jobs, and it's stupid. So Javier, you're here for another mini rant on that. I want to see the announcers when there is an unfinish. Like Joe Tessitore is good with a lot of emotions. One thing I'd like to improve on, and Cole's been around forever, he does this occasionally but not consistently, is, man, I really wanted to find out if Braun Breaker could beat Ludwig Kaiser. I think Kaiser really thought it could beat Breaker, and Sheamus took that away from us. I understand Sheamus's outrage because of what Ludwig did last week, but yeah, I feel like, you know, he took something away. We were really invested in this. Like, share our emotion, express it, underline it, own it, the same way they're owning Gunther losing to Cody clean. Make people upset with run-ins, and actually have mixed feelings about Sheamus doing it, even though it is in retaliation to Kaiser doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, at some point it does become less. It becomes more of a personal preference, you know, of how much you're willing to, you know, how much you're, you know, when you're watching a movie, how much you're willing to, you know, how far your suspension of disbelief goes. So I do understand that some people just don't want to see any cheating, and they just want to see like pure like sportsmanship, you know, shake their hands, ring, you know, like classic Ring of Honor, you know, kind of stuff. I totally get that. I mean, Ring of Honor kind of, that was like what set them apart, because they were the other ones doing that. So
it was a deliberate move away from what ECW was, you know.
Yeah,
Gabe Sapolsky told me outright, we don't even want to run ECW Arena. We want to create our own identity. ECW is great. Others are going to copycat it and, you know, do derivative versions of it. And we saw some offshoots of it across the country. You know, Gabe Sapolsky wanted to be different, and let's go the opposite direction. It's like Eric Bischoff told me in my Torch talk with him, you know, I don't know, 18 years ago, whatever it was. I drew a line down the middle of a yellow notepad and wrote, here's what WWE's good at and what they're known for. What can we do to differentiate ourselves on the other side of the ledger? And, you know, he's told that story with various twists and variations since then. You want to differentiate yourself, and ROH did that. But I don't know that you can do all pure matches and draw at the level that WWE draws. You want to have that. But my point is, you don't ever want to make it if you don't establish what the rules are, then when they're broken, there's less of a sense of getting away with something. And
that's what I get to, because, like, you know, I get, like, if you have your tag team partner or a manager outside and he trips the opponent, that's how you get the win. I could understand that. Oh man, that sucks, and you know, and you kind of like do that under the thing. But when you have like a match, like a lot of the bloodline finishes, you know, where you have like the entire bloodline coming to the match, and it becomes like just a cluster, you know, bleed. You know, at that point, like, you do want to hear, like, you know, that, I mean, traditionally that a segment like that would lead to, okay, our next match is going to be inside a cell, or our next match is going to be inside a, you know, cage, or the next match is going to be, if everybody's going to be out there anyway, let's have a lumberjack match. You know, it usually leads to something where the management's saying, okay, well, if we're going to play this game, then we're going to, you know, play this game. Or, you know, everybody's like no longer's around. And, you know, because that's what I think, to me, like in the House of Black stuff, the House of Torture in New Japan, you know, that was aggravating, because they would like take out the referee, take out the ring person, someone would ring the bell, they would turn off the lights, and it would, like, you know, complete and utter chaos. And there's like nobody to, you know, say, okay, well, you've gone too far. Because I mean, that's the extreme on one side. And then on the other side, like I said, you know, guy just sticks his hand out and trips the wrestler as he's running the ropes, and that creates an opening. So you know, I'm somewhere in between that, you know, and I think everybody has like a different, you know, place where they're going to be. House of Torture, trip, you know, manager trips the guy. Yeah.
Standard deviation on this topic says a good unclean finish is when it serves a story and the promotion sells the inherent lack of integrity. A bad unclean finish is an escape hatch that's treated like a normal occurrence. Perfect. Yep, that summarizes my view. I think I coined the escape hatch finish term. And yeah, when you see that, just, or, you know, brave booking versus cowardly booking, you know, it's like you don't want to see. Dusty Rhodes would do this sometimes back in the day. I'd report about it. Dusty would book matches, but he didn't have a finish in mind. He just thought, we'll draw money with this match, and then, you know, you got all the ref bumps, the Dusty finishes, and so yeah. All right, let's bring Brian from Phoenix onto the show. They were in that area tonight. Maybe we're going to hear about it. Brian, 33-year senior PWTorch VIP subscriber, on camera on the post show. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Wade. Hey, Javier. Can you both hear me first? Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Javier said yes.
Okay. So Wade, this time I'm actually sitting in my car, so I'm not, hopefully the sound is pretty good. Well, you're not going to hear anything because there's nobody parked around me.
Your car is good acoustics.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll make this quick because I'm noticing how long you've been on so far. And Wade, you just said it. I put in my byline. I'm 33-year senior Torch VIP subscriber, and I really appreciate all the hard work you've done over all these years. And I really appreciate the work you do. And Javier, I think we talked once or twice, but it's good to talk to you as always.
Good talking to you.
Great, Brian. Thank you, as I always say, for your support over the years. And glad you're able to call up the show and you send in good questions to so many of the shows. And it's great to have you here.
So Wade, you did mention, I say I'm from Phoenix, but the card was in Glendale, Arizona. Glendale, the arena, Desert Diamond Arena, is like 10 minutes from my house. It actually takes me longer to park than to actually drive here.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So it's pretty nice. So I saw in the beginning of your report that you had on the website, Wade, what Russell Tick said what the sellout or how many tickets were sold. So inside the arena, there were pockets or areas where you can see the seats were empty, but I believe those are like the tickets that secondary places that tried to sell them maybe just didn't sell them, but for the most part the arena was full to me. The seats that I did see that were empty stayed empty the entire time that I was there. So I'm just thinking they were probably just weren't resold. The crowd for the most part was really good. I never thought I would say this, but I know I would say it, but these 2-hour Raws are just so much better, because I had to be there such a long time. So that was the good part. A couple things I'll mention right off the cuff. First of all, 85. So it's just me going by myself. $85 was the ticket price, and I'm in the upper level. I didn't want to spend a lot of money, so I spent $85, but I was in the upper level. My seats were we're actually on the opposite side of the hard camera. The area around where the hard camera was at, it was tarped off, but then everything above that was sold out, or was sold, I would say that part. The crowd was pretty good. I've seen it probably a little bit more ruckus, but then it being, a Monday night, tomorrow. Well, you know what? To be Wayne Javier, I think some schools, like the school in my school district, they are off this week. So it's probably, some people had, some people, families, I should say, were probably off tomorrow. So maybe they did come in. And I did see, a good number of kids, like you're always going to see it at a wrestling event. So I wasn't sure if that would affect it, it being a school night or tickets being sold. I mentioned this to you before, Wade, that Phoenix is a weird town, and where the Desert Diamond Arena, and then right next door, State Farm Stadium, is where the Cardinals play. Arizona Cardinals play football. So it's on the west side of town. So it takes people a little while to get out here. So with the 5:30 advertised start, and then Raw started at 6, our local time, obviously time here. It takes some people a while to get out here to get seated. But so that's that part. The dark matches before Raw started, all women's matches which was interesting.
Huh.
So it was Alba Fire. She lost to Katana Chance. Chloe Stark beat Lyra Valkyria, and then Dakota Kai, she beat. Okay, of course, I'm being on the tip of my tongue. We'll come back to that at the end. Other than that, the 2 dark matches were at the end of the card. LA Knight beat Santos Escobar, and then Cody Rhodes beat Solo Sikoa in a street fight match. Both matches didn't go really that long, but they both were, pretty good. The arena, of course, started emptying, even though the LA Knight's music hit right after Bianca Belair won. And so people, started leaving us. People stayed around, and similarly as well. And they did announce that Cody was going to have wrestle Solo Sikoa, but some people just stay around for that too. And that's off the tip of my tongue. So what questions, Wade and Javier, do you have for me?
Well, first I'll bring Junaid's question in the chat. Chat room's welcome to ask questions of our on-site correspondent, Brian. Hey, Brian, hope you're having a good night. How did Rhea's pop compare to everyone else? She had a notably bigger pop to my ears compared to her War Games teammates in that backstage segment.
And Junaid, I've known your name because, we listen to a lot of the same shows, and hi to you. So it was interesting, but Rhea was never on, never shown in the arena. Same thing with the Usos and Sammy; they were never shown in the arena. So I'm not sure if those were pre-taped or not. Junaid, it's kind of tough to tell, to be honest. She did get, where the people who were in camera with her, of course, Bianca was there. She's going to get and Bianca did get a really big cheer when she came up for her match against Nia Jax. But I would agree with you that there was a lot of mommy chants when they showed Rhea Ripley on the screen.
Cool. Javier, do you have a question for Brian about tonight's in-person experience?
Yeah, I mean, how would you rank the reaction to the wrestlers that did show up? Because I was surprised by the pop that Priest got when he came out, because that was like whoa, that was pretty good.
Javier is really interesting because, I mean, Gunther, was he obviously got more boos, but I think it's more Phoenix is a pretty big Latino market, and I think that was kind of the bump that gave uh Damien over. I should say, by the way, that Dragon Lee and Rey Mysterio, they did some local press here, and they gave WWE gave $10,000 to a local St. Mary's food bank, and they were both on the news, giving one of those
Nice.
big checks. So that was actually pretty cool. So, Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee for that match. Oh boy, I tell you, I was talking to a guy sitting next to me, and I'm sorry I'm going all over the place, Javier, as I'm asking your question here, but we were talking about the Creed brothers, and Julius one of these days, when he breaks out, not to say anything bad about Brutus, but he's going to be something else when he breaks out. So I'm sorry that I'm weaving around here, Javier, to answer your question.
Well, so yeah, rank the pops if you can.
So
was there
it was
a clear top one or two, or was there a big drop off after 3 or 4? And how would you rank them?
No, I'm not, thanks, Wade. I'm sorry about that. So
Yeah.
it was Ray and Dragon Lee got the biggest pops. Bianca Belair got a huge pop as well. Um, since like the sounds bad, but the more popular people being LA Knight and Cody were at the end of the match, or they weren't on TV, but they would, of course, Cody got the hugest pop when he came out, even though the arena was people were leaving. On the show, though, I say it was really Ray and Dragon Lee. That match got the biggest pop. As far as the Judgment Day, and when Dominic and Carlito came out, they were booed pretty heavily because and now it wasn't just because it was like the War Raiders were fighting Judgment Day or fighting Finn and JD. It was more that when Dom and Carlito came out, there was a guy who was cosplaying Dominic was got a lot of people laughing at him or getting pictures of him.
That's fun. So Braun Breaker compared to Ludwig Kaiser, there was a chant during the match. What was a percentage breakdown? Was it 100%, 90-10, 50-50 during? And did it change from ring entrances based on the story they told and how they told it during the match? In any way you noticed, Brian?
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, Wade, because I'm not sure if all the dog barks came out on TV, if you and Javier heard them all, but Braun was. I mean, there was nothing for Kaiser at all. It was I would say all boos, and anytime he did anything or he got something over on Braun, it was all boos at all. So I as the three of us know, there wasn't necessarily a change that Braun had. He's just now who's he wrestling? Him being a baby face versus being a heel, or getting booed versus being cheered. But it was all Braun was was more positive. When Sheamus came out, Sheamus got his pop, and I got some few laughs from the people around me because I said, hey, it's gonna be a three-way playa, channeling Teddy Long and him. Adam Pearce. I'm not sure they came on TV or not, but Adam Pearce said, hey, if you guys want to fight, we'll do a three-way. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen in Phoenix, but then everybody's gonna be some high fives because I called it. It's gonna be a triple threat.
Very good. Talk about the New Day segment and how interested the crowd seemed in that. Did they? I assume everything aired on the big screen before and after, so fans were up to speed on everything. You had the bickering at the beginning with Xavier, and were people shocked at how quickly Xavier lost? Just talk about the ebb and flow of the crowd investment emotionally in that.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that too, Wade. It was at the beginning, we were just kind of grumbling when they were talking, and hey, maybe they're finally on the same page now. And then when Alpha Academy won, and yeah, it was won pretty quick. And when they went backstage, we all were like, ooh, wow, you lost to Brock in 6 minutes. Well, you've never been a champion. We were like, oh, everybody was doing all that. So it was. We'll see how this, next week goes. I know, Wade, from listening to you, that you're not the biggest New Day fan where they are leading up to this. I'll be sad to see them break up. I'll be sad to see them break up. But to go back to your question, everybody was like, some of the little kids around me are a little bit more shocked. And the adults and I were just kind of like, anytime somebody, when Xavier came back to say something to Kofi and they went back and forth, we were all oohing and eyeing with it.
Javier, do you want to jump in with anything else?
That's pretty much what I got.
The reaction for Bianca Belair, they cut to some girls in the crowd cheering for her and that kind of thing. How did she come across in person to you, Brian, your personal opinion, as a headlining babyface star against Nia Jax earlier in the show? Some people were making the case that she could be the MVP of the women's division this year. Did that feel like a worthy main event? Was her gravitas? And what have you thought of, what do you think tonight of how Bianca came across in this role? They're doing something with Jade that might mean there's a countdown clock on how long Bianca and Jade are actually a tag team. This could be a path to that. And, she's had some time away from being a single star, but the landscape is changing a bit in the singles division. Your thoughts?
I've always been a Bianca fan, Wade. I've mentioned that I've met her mom and dad twice, and it was both times with, like, one time here in Phoenix, when this is back when Bianca was in NXT, and she had I think it was against I ran into her parents, and when I was in Portland for the last NXT Portland takeover that they had, and in the takeover they had here in Phoenix, and how I knew her mother was because she had I saw the shirt that she was wearing, and so we talked for a few minutes. So I've always been, to say all that, I've always been a big Bianca fan. I thought she came across well. The kids in my area, they were all dancing when she came out. I always thought she had star potential, and I think that she stepped away so far from the singles division. If she came back with the right opponents, I think they can bring her back to the top again. I think it hurt her with the Becky Lynch loss that quick, and she came back, of course, after all that. But I think that part did hurt her character. Like I said, I've always been a fan of her. I think she could come back and be a good single center baby face star of the women's division. And we'll see what happens with all the women that are in NXT and how they bring them up and how can they challenge her. So that's my thoughts on that.
All right, very good. Brian, there were video segments on the show, quite a few of them. How was the crowd? Was the crowd noticeably invested in some and not others?
All of the video segments that we saw, we were watching in my area. We were watching and agreeing with her, or and not. I can't say bored with it. You could tell when the matches went to commercial, because it was a break in the video screen where the three of us have watched wrestling for a really long time, so when they're going to have a commercial, and it would be a noticeable break, like a 3-second break in the screen before, and then the screen came back up, and we were watching what was going on. The breaks, to me, it didn't, and the video packages, to me, didn't lose us as an audience. They did the similar things that they've done. I've seen them done for the last year or so, where they have the DX cam. They had during commercials, they had the DX cam. They had the sign cam. I think the sign cam they actually show on TV now, but they show a lot more in the theater, or actually in the arena, I should say. So I would say, all the video, because especially with it coming up to being Survivor Series, we were invested in the videos they were showing since it was coming up. It's coming up. I'm sorry.
Very good. Brian, is there anything else you want to share with us about your experience tonight? On-off camera, crowd chants, anything that caught your eye or that you observed?
Well, I didn't get a chance to see too much of the merchandise. Unfortunately, there was a truck right outside of the arena. I didn't get a chance to take a really good look into it, so I cannot give you a merchandise report. I thought this was a really good. I thought it was a really good audience participation during it. It seemed like to me everybody had a good time. I try to always engage with the people sitting around me, and I read the sign. There was no sign that stood out to me that were unusual. So I thought it was really. Yeah. I thought it was I had a really good time. I thought the people around me had a really good time as well.
Great.
SmackDown's coming the 3rd, I think, of January. 3rd of January. So we have a SmackDown coming, but that's actually going to be in Phoenix at the Footprint Center. So Wade, I would like to say again, thanks a lot for having me on. You and Javier having me on. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the hard work you two do. And thanks a lot. And hope you both and everybody else out there too, have a really good night. Thanks a lot.
By the way, before you run, if you don't mind sharing, what you pay for your tickets?
Oh, I will tell you. Give me. I'm going to do this, do that.
We should start asking that of our on-site correspondents again, because where'd you sit and what'd you pay with the way ticket prices are shooting up these days?
So how much I paid was $85.66. The ticket was $55. Service fee was $14.60. Facility fee was $5. The order processing fee was $6, and tax was $5.06. So again, it was $85.66. My seat was I was in 217 row F, going up. A would be on the ledge, and then and I was in seat 5. I was kind of mad, by the way, Wade and Javier, about being in seat 5. So normally I like to take a row or like seat 1, so like the first seat, but they wouldn't sell me that one seat by itself because there was another seat next to it. So I had to get seat 5.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So I'm 6'4", and these seats are like really cramped. So I ended up just left that seat. And I just stood up for most of the time. And then once the crowd started standing out, then I could sit back down on my seat. Then I can use my legs on to lay them on the other side of the seat, so I can at least.
I feel you. I feel you. I make it's so selfish when you're 6'3", 6'4", like we are, and you're like, I need an aisle seat. It's like, you like being tall isn't beneficial in other ways, and now you want the cool seat where you can get up and out easily. But it really is uncomfortable in some of these arenas with the leg room. So I'm
first world problems way because
for sure. Yeah, but honestly, like having your legs crammed and standing is more appealing than having things in there. So cool. Appreciate you sharing that. 86 doesn't sound too bad. It'd be nice if there weren't all those fees. You could just pay $55 and not pay fees, but such is life in the modern world.
And I will say, Wade, and it's wrestling, and that tickets are expensive, and I chose to sit where I sat at, and I could have gotten some lesser price seats if I would have went. When I looked straight down, I was sitting the hard camera side. So no, I'm sorry. I was sitting on the camera side because everybody's back was. But I was sitting way up, so there was no way I would have been on camera. So I, decided to pay for that. But it's just me going, Wade and Javier. For a family to go, it can be pretty expensive. And it's wrestling, but NFL prices, those are expensive. Everything's expensive nowadays. Baseball's a little bit different. I know we're outside of baseball season right now. That's a little bit different. But everything's expensive. All these live events are expensive.
Yeah. All right, Brian. Thanks again. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
I hope you both Javier and Wade, have a really good night, and then all the listeners will have a really great night too. And thanks a lot, and be safe out there, everybody. Appreciate everybody. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. All right, Javier. Let's just wrap up. I'll finish up. Chris has emailed. He just had a few comments we've already covered. I'll do one more email, and we'll close things out here. Chris Johnson says, my wife was in the room passively watching. After watching the New Day segment before their match, she said, so I guess they are staying together. Proof that the storytelling is effective for some people. So, I mean, his wife passively watching thought, they're going to get along. And then I want to know what happened afterwards. Chris goes, I love the intensity in the New Day argument after the match. It would be a fun feud if and when they split. I figured the IC title for the women was coming. I think if they're going to have a secondary title for men and 3-hour show starting in January, this makes sense to me, and the belt looked good. The babyface interference to give the babyfaces the advantage in War Games is different. Kind of a lame show overall, missing the key ingredient of any bloodline issues. Javier, did you think they needed bloodline issues? I thought we got it with Sammy and the Usos talking about Roman meeting with Punk. That was a development. I don't think we need anything major, but that gave us a talking point. What do you think of that segment?
Yeah, I mean, you also had Sammy, because it felt like Sammy was not all in on the Punk idea.
Yeah,
more than any of the other ones.
Yeah,
so that was interesting. While Jimmy was like all in, because Jimmy has all the faith in Paul Heyman, which makes me think that maybe he shouldn't be having all that faith in Paul Heyman. It's definitely a lot, and I think that's one of the reasons you don't, because you still have SmackDown. Well, I think that's one of the reasons you don't want to pack too much stuff into it right now, because you want to let what happened on SmackDown simmer a bit, and you don't want to add too much more stuff into it to make people think where you're going to go. Because no Seth Rollins, so what's that going to mean now? How's he going to get involved? Is he going to be involved in War Games? Because if you want a path to CM Punk and Seth Rollins, doing something to screw up War Games might be something that that puts you on that path. In terms of the women's War Game with the Bayley cheating, I'm pretty, it's a good chance for everybody who's involved, but I'm pretty sure that Bayley's the one who took out Jade. So,
do you like that?
Gives Bayley something to do. Because apparently Jade's injury is going to be long term. Did you hear what it is, Wade?
The what is?
The Jade's injury. That Jade's going to be out for a certain period of time. I heard that she's going to be out for a bit because it's a legit issue that she has. So depending on how long it is, they could just stretch it out, kind of like what they did with the when Rikishi did it for The Rock kind of scenario.
Yeah.
I could see it be, at that point you could throw in Bianca Belair because of the, just because of jealousy. You could throw in Naomi because as a misguided attempt to get Bayley involved, since she's, friends with Bayley also. And, maybe she's, thinks that, we could all be friends. It's just Jade who's in the way. It could be Io Sky, who's, former member with Bayley. But it feels like it likely is, if it's going to pay off soon, probably be Bayley.
Yeah. How do you grade the build to the women's War Games, just overall?
It's hard to compare with the men's one because the men's was like something that's been building up for, it's gotten the momentum for it. This kind of feels like, hey, we got this stuff going on. But I think they did. I think everything's kind of coming together when all is said and done. It's hard to compare the two, so you have two War Games going on at the same time. Because particularly because one of them is like a blood feud, and this is more like it's really the only real blood feud there is between Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. So the rest of the women kind of feel like, hey, we're also sort of like involved. So there's a little bit less personal animosity there that you would, So what I'm saying is basically this feels like when, Hell in the Cell was a pay-per-view name and we have to like get people in the cell. We're kind of forcing the story into it that might not necessarily have like the chops to go in there. But, with that said, I think they did a better job than not in getting, people interested in, particularly with the, who's the culprit. And they didn't hit it hard either. Who took her out? The commentator assumed it was Nia Jax. So that's like a story for another time. So, it's kind of weird because I also would like to see something between Bayley and Io Sky, since Bayley got kicked out of that group, so that would have been nice, something nice to see there. But overall, I think they did a okay job. Like I'll give it a B- maybe.
On the men's War Game side, Glenn B says, are they really going to play up the "Can we trust CM Punk" angle, but then have Jimmy or Sammy turn on Roman? There's so many moving pieces that can happen with this right now. And, almost too many, because Seth could or could not be involved. Cody could be. KO and Orton are kind of peripherally involved just because of the KO Cody thing. But mostly tonight's segment with Sammy, going back to my question to you on that, is it came across like he might, I don't know if jealous is the word, but if CM Punk suddenly enters and is this like hero who joins the bloodline who's not blood, and gets embraced by Roman, but in a secret meeting that not everybody's invited to. I mean, I think we could see Sammy's side, but it could also lead to Sammy getting disgruntled. Do you like that approach? I mean, we've seen Sammy as a heel, but this would be a different kind of heel. Or does he just get disgruntled, but you're sort of sympathetic towards him? Or I mean, I'm not ruling out Heyman and Punk don't turn on all of them either. I mean,
That's
everything is on the table. Yeah.
That's what I'm more thinking because as far as we know, because I mean, go back to the earliest parts of the story. Is the reason that Heyman came to Roman is because Brock Lesnar was not taking his calls. Sorry. Brock Lesnar wasn't calling him.
Yeah.
or accepting his calls. That's what I meant. Yeah. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the same thing. You know, did Roman call him while he was in traction? After getting destroyed, did Roman even check up on him? Because apparently when he called him, he was surprised to find out his number was disconnected. You know, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Is he there really as the wise man, or is he there bringing the Paul Heyman guy in for his own thing? I think Sammy's thing is that he smells something's not right. I don't think it's necessarily he's jealous or anything. I think it's more like he smells something weird's up, and he's not like totally trusting of what's going on. And again, the Seth Rollins situation, like I totally see Seth Rollins, break into the thing to try to take out Bronson Reed, and then that might end up causing some issue with maybe even Seth Rollins might end up costing the OG Bloodline the match because of something that he does, and then that leads to CM Punk over on Raw say, hey, you screwed up the match, and you start something up there. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can take it. I have not felt which way I'm leaning towards yet, but that it definitely leaves a lot of fertile ground for storytelling going forward.
I like it. I mean, yeah, there's really a bunch of intriguing options, and not knowing where they're going to go, but a lot of them make sense and a lot of them sound interesting is pretty cool. All right, we'll close out mailbag here with JB from Detroit, who says, it seems now Finn is telling Judgment Day that they're one big happy family rather than anyone actually feeling or believing it. Finn Balor is stepping up, is clearly the leader. Originally, Judgment Day wasn't supposed to have a leader. It's all for one for all, but clearly there's a hierarchy now. People in the chat are excited about Dominic's eventual babyface turn. Is Finn getting too heavy-handed, too domineering, asserting himself too much as a leader? What do you think's going on there, Javier?
Well, I mean, I've always said that the Judgment Day stuff, and I'm not knocking it because I actually like it. It's like the CW stuff, and this, I mean, Balor literally said, "There are no leaders here, but when I'm in charge, things get done." I mean,
yeah.
And he's been given the side eye to live, and he's definitely up to something. He's definitely up to taking control of the whole thing. I wouldn't be surprised if, that there's going to be yet another change for the Judgment Day coming down the pike sooner rather than later. Because he's already been talking about another thing which I had mentioned on my show was one of the things I didn't like today. Nia Jax was out, and no money in the bank cash in. They've been very quiet on the Money in the Bank side of things. So if Money in the Bank is not mentioned by the commentary team, if it's not center in the screen, it means that they're lulling you into a false sense of security, and there might be a cash in then at War Games.
Spoiler alert! It was working, Javier, and now you've ruined it. You've brought it up. Everyone's guard was down, and now look. Very good. All right. Up next from JB, who has more upside, Ludwig Kaiser or Kyle Fletcher? I view them both similarly in their respective companies' ecosystems. I'd say Kyle Fletcher right now. Javier, what do you think? Based on context and depth charts and current pushes and all that, but I mean, I'm a Ludwig Kaiser advocate too. So,
man, yeah, that is a damn good question. I think right now Kaiser's a little bit up, but I think that Kyle has like an open runway in front of him right now.
Yeah. Well, what would differentiate them? What are the strengths and weaknesses of both? If you had, let's say you're drafting, you're up and they're both on the board and they're the clear next two picks. Why do you pick one? Why do you think of picking the other?
I think I'd go with Kyle Fletcher because he's younger in every sense of the of the word. I'd lean towards him again mainly because of the potential. It would, but I could do stuff with some of the stuff that I didn't follow him too closely, but I'm aware enough of what Kaiser was doing in the indies, and I think that I could do something. But I'm thinking indie brand. I'm not thinking like big promotion. I think big promotion. I'd probably go with Cal Fletcher, particularly with the in the position where he was left after AEW.
Yeah. All right. We can cover that for months and years to come, perhaps. By the way, you keep mentioning your show, Javier. We should tell people it is called Acknowledging WWE. You have a rotation of co-hosts. Tell people about your show a little bit, and then we'll get back to JB's email.
Yeah, I mean, generally we talk WWE and just if things go somewhere else, things go somewhere else. Got Jason from Australia and Mike Myers and my brother pretty much standard rotation. I've been lazy getting a hold of other people. This week I'll probably just previewing Survivor Series, since that's coming up.
Yep, it makes sense to do that. The timing is good for doing such things. So yeah, search PWTorch in your podcast app, everybody, and subscribe. Different show each day of the week with different hosts and different themes, but a WWE-centric show hosted by Javier is one of the good reasons to add that to your free podcast list. Those, of course, are included with the commercial break skipped right over for VIP members and Patreon supporters. So that's another perk that comes with it. Okay, let's see. How do we get back to the email? Here we are. This is now 2 weeks in a row, a lame finish for Braun Breaker matches, both involving Sheamus. Triple H needs to do a better job with quality control. Also a very lame way to get to triple threat match. I'm not particularly looking forward to this match. I think the build has been bad. Okay, you should not have one-on-one matches 2 weeks in a row that lead to triple threat matches more than once a year. I don't think it's a lame way to come. It's a logical way to have a triple threat match. The way WWE books, you can have a different booking philosophy and not do that, but if you do it, the key is kind of like with titles, don't overdo it. Same with ref bumps, same with distraction finishes, all the tropes. Don't overdo it. If you don't overdo it makes sense.
Not too long ago, it was they had just done the story with, I want to say it was Sheamus, Bronson Reed, and Breaker, maybe. Recently there was one not too long ago I think over the kind of not too long ago. It's something that he does often. The triple threats to get two triple threats to get two winners to face each other again, that's another thing that's done a lot. Relax on some of that stuff. You can't really call that a tournament. Come on. It's
qualifying. Yeah. So that's the thing. I mean, anything that you do that makes sense it happens on pay-per-views. It happens in wrestling booking week to week. There's a lot of things you can justify individually, but you have to put it in context of is it chipping away at a core tenet of everything making sense. You can't have too much of things that break away from that. And so one of them, to be specific here, is you get people excited about IC title matches 2 weeks in a row. It just gets interrupted by a third person. Yes, the logical conclusion in the way WWE books is for the GM to go, you guys want to fight, get a triple threat match. More logical would be suspending the two wrestlers who interfered in title matches and saying, now the number 3 Intercontinental title contender gets a shot. Neither of you do. That would be my vote, is have a GM who punishes people who ruin title matches. And I think that's where JB's saying it's lame. You're rewarding people for interfering in a fit of rage over your disappointment and the disarray that you're trying to fight against as a GM. But in a logical world, Kaiser would have been suspended, not rewarded, and Sheamus would be suspended, not rewarded. So in that aspect, it's lame.
I was talking about the tournaments because I feel bad picking on them because they're not the only ones that do it, but AEW had the AEW World Tag Team Championship Full Gear 4-Way Contender Series, and all that was 3 matches, and the winners were in a 4-way. I mean, you can't call that a real legitimate tournament. I'm picking on them in this case because it's just happened, but they both do it way too much.
Yeah. All right. In honor of New Day's 10th anniversary celebration scheduled for next Monday's Raw, what is New Day's legacy? Where do they rank in terms of all-time teams and stables? How has Big E potentially his career-ending injury affected the group and the group's trajectory? On 20 seconds or less, Javier, since we're over 2 hours on the show, what's your first thought when you talk about New Day's legacy?
I mean, longevity. I mean, you keep on. I missed much of New Day because I was not watching wrestling during that. So, so I missed when they were probably at their hottest and central to things. So the hottest thing I remember them from was their feud with the Usos, and I think that their team that when they were serious, they were really good, and I wish I had seen more of them. That's kind of my of that version of that. Outside of that, they were fun for the kids, and then that's who you're gonna have to ask because I would have to see. I don't follow sales and stuff like that, so that might be something you do have to consider too, like the draw it had outside of like the biggest merch sellers and stuff like that. That also matters, but in terms of wrestling though. A little bit too silly half the time and not serious. And I kind of wish it was serious a little bit more.
It's easy for me to say, but I wish merch data had nothing to do with who got pushed because I think if you push somebody else instead of the top merch seller and you think they're a better person to push, their merch sales will come if it's cool. It'll come with getting pushed and getting featured. And you can sometimes sabotage a team by having, I think the Acclaimed, their careers were derailed over selling foam scissors and trying to get social media reaction and memes and stuff. And they lost sight of the business they're actually in, which is being, serious wrestlers having serious matches, aspiring to go for titles. And they just became a merch show. And I think people stopped taking them seriously, even though they sold they got in the short run, they made good money for themselves in AEW. Same with New Day. At some point it's like, yeah, you don't want to give up the merch money, but we're in the pro wrestling business and the biggest merch, you're going to sell a lot of merchandise, but This isn't entirely true, and it's pure conjecture, but I think it's logical. I think people show up at buildings, and in their budget, they have a certain amount of money for WWE merchandise. And they're just going to pick the coolest merchandise that's for sale until their budget is spent. So it might be New Day, but if you take New Day off the table, but you got to have good merch, a good selection, their second choice will get sold. Like I don't think there's a big drop-off in merch sales because someone who's a hot merch seller, you turn them heel or you give them an act that doesn't feel like it's just existing to sell merchandise. You want to milk it a little bit, but at some point you just push who should be pushed to tell the best stories on TV. And I think all the other metrics are ultimately more important, and the difference in merch isn't that big of a deal.
The only thing, because the only reason I agree with you, 90% of the way there, but they also have the toy factor, which is, because a lot of kids with little horns that glow and stuff like that. That's something that you are not going to buy as an adult. And, but you came to your show with 4 kids and your 4 kids want the horn, so, I don't want to see that to be my main event, but I'm fine. It's the clown show early on kind of thing. So in terms of that, respect.
Yeah. And I would, so that plays into sometimes some people are just going to sell a particular kind of merchandise that isn't easily replicated. That said, I still would rather have New Day draw money and be a serious act for me and not just be defined down as a clown show selling toys to kids. I think that's limiting there might be an offsetting negative greater than what you're trying to preserve is my argument. So I think, the default is you're going to sell a lot of merchandise. If you have cool merchandise, have enough that you don't have to push someone only because of that. JB adds, while I'm looking forward to New Day's likely breakup to see what Kofi and Woods will do as singles, I think they've gone a bit over the line in telegraphing it to happen next week. I'm okay with the telegraphing because it doesn't feel manufactured. It's pro wrestling, but it doesn't feel manufactured in pro wrestling way. It feels like we're seeing the Xavier's patience being him becoming more petulant and Kofi becoming his patience being tested with Xavier's actions. And we've seen it in real time over the course of a couple months. I mean, it seems like the crescendo would be the 10th anniversary. It's a high pressure situation for all three. It's a big big day for them, and you could imagine things kind of coming to a head a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the only complaint, pacing a bit off because you are dealing with specific set dates, and it is what it is. Sometimes, that you're going to have to run into that when it's wrestling. You're booking, to specific dates.
Yeah. I do like the old references to New Day's failures over the years in tonight's backstage segment to provide fuel to the fire of the eventual split. Yeah, that's a good backstory. When Scarlett looked in the mirror immediately after the Final Testament left and Nikki Cross appeared, that was a bit too much in terms of supernatural for me. There is a 0% chance that the group wouldn't have seen her as they left in that time frame, barring some magical phenomenon. My issue primarily is, why did the camera linger on her when it went to, if something wasn't about to happen? Like, that's the weird part. Like, what if it's just, again, my stance would be everything should be filmed like it's happenstance. A film crew doesn't know what's going to happen. They don't know if something is going to happen. They're just filming the things that seem most newsworthy. That keeps me immersed. When a camera lingers on someone in a way that feels unnatural, my immersion breaks. I'm like, oh, something in the script is indicating to the camera person that they should, or the director should stay with this camera longer because we're about to see something. And I'm not a fan of that. It takes me out of it. I don't think everybody thinks about it on that level, but I think everybody feels it on that level. The more you can make people feel it, that these things are just happening and being filmed, and the less it feels fake, the better. In this week's Pursing Torch newsletter, there's a little snippet that I had in the Pursing Torch newsletter 20 years ago about a tough enough segment on SmackDown, and Vince McMahon and Stephanie McMahon actually argued over this. Al Snow had suggested, instead of doing a body slam, what was it? A body slam or chop chop? Like, something wasn't going to look realistic because the guys weren't trained enough for it. And Vince didn't care. He just thought it made for good TV. And he went with a thing that looked more fake, that the guys weren't trained for. But Stephanie didn't want to. Al Snow was pushing the other direction too. And so sometimes you do things because it, quote, makes for good TV, but it makes things look fake. And that's, I think in the end, I'm on, Stephanie and Al Snow's side, if I'm remembering my reporting on that correctly, that they should go with what feels more real, even if it's a little bit at the expense of something that makes for good TV. So to me, Nikki Cross just happening to be in the background there, in the camera knowing to linger on it, was annoying to me. Well, how do you feel about that, Javier?
Yeah, I'm not as it's not as immersion breaking because I just picture that the camera's still rolling and there's like a 5-minute lag, and then the producers just like stay on it because something happened within that 5 minutes. That's kind of my mental gymnastic, my mental thing. I need to go see exactly where she was standing because I thought she was like coming either like on the other side of the door or coming in through the door. So
yeah, that part,
the
part that JD was, I didn't mind the JD aspect or what JD brought up as much as it bothered JD, because in my mind, she could have, the others left the room and then she kind of snuck in the background. That's what I saw, because there was a long enough pause with that. That's realistic. Yeah. I'll actually, for context, this is, if you're a VIP member, you can read this whole cover story, issue 833, cover dated in November 2004. There was a disagreement last week between Stephanie McMahon and Vince McMahon. This was our cover story over footage tape for SmackDown. Big Show was part of a skit where the 7 remaining Tough Enough contestants were involved. The skit was set up where each contestant would have 20 seconds to talk smack to Big Show, and in response, he'd end up body slamming them. And it sounded basic, but the problem was the trainees had yet to learn how to take body slams. They were about a week into their training and hadn't gotten to that yet. Al Snow made a suggestion that Big Show chop the students because there'd be no way they wouldn't sell that properly because the chops really hurt. Vince McMahon, though, was set on the body slams. Apparently, Big Show agreed, believing he was strong enough to lift the students even without their cooperation. But after the segment was taped, Stephanie shared a similar point of view as Hunter and Al Snow about Tough Enough in general, and felt students made Big Show look bad because it exposed that body slams typically take cooperation from the slammy to look proper. But Vince disagreed, believing enthusiastically that the footage should air as is because it made for good TV. And he made the final decision Thursday morning that he was right and to stick with the footage as is. And there's more details on that, but it's kind of interesting. There's definitely more details about kind of what the different opinions were on that skit. But, choices are made all the time, Javier, between what makes for good TV versus what feels immersive and realistic. And, you can't always achieve immersion and realism and still accomplish what you need to accomplish, but you don't want to be too loose with that either. That can definitely undercut things.
Yeah, there's a thing called the rule of cool. Sometimes you will say, "Hey, this makes no logical sense, but it looks really cool," and you kind of have to balance that.
Yeah.
And for some people, and again, that's one of those things where they're two different extremes. And at that point, it's kind of like your taste is really where more more follow. I mean, I'm someone who loved I love the NXT stuff that they were doing, the TNA stuff that they were doing, with the Wrestle House and stuff like that. That's like just total fiction, but I was fine with that because that was I'm fine with that. WWE, like, yeah, I could understand like the Cody Roman thing at the stadium. I understand why a lot of people would be turned off by that. I'm a lot more like I personally, and I know it's like a taste thing. So like I liked it, but I understand all the arguments against it.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch it and you think, hey, these two got together and cooperated to film an over-the-top skit, and we're told, cut, take two, let's get this angle, let's put it all together, and they cooperated, and it's worth the special effects for that, or you think no one's going to care and it looks real enough?
Like the idea I came with is just show the drone fly down and then don't do those far away shots, and just like if the drone were looking at cutting from one to the other.
Yeah.
And then somebody then cuts it afterwards.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, you could have done a couple of things and still gotten the
That's
same
the thing. It
vibe
just,
out of it.
Yeah. It was just, too ostentatious. It was, it was Oasis's third album. Just there's good stuff there.
Multiple cuts, like the multiple cut scenes. That was where,
Yeah.
I found that annoying just because of the number of cuts that they did.
Exactly. Yeah. But the setting was cool. It made made them feel like big stars.
The music, I mean, the music, because I mean, obviously this was a done scene, but the music, you got that in post, that, kind of like how the November Rain video was probably the best thing that they did for the AEW thing. So, because music does help a lot in getting you involved in something.
Yep. All right. Next, when Scott, I think that having a tournament to crown the inaugural champion is a tired, lazy trope. The news does not make me optimistic about the time and effort that we put into this title, much like the current women's tag titles. Well, how else would you determine the champion? Am I misunderstanding, Javier? I think having a tournament to crown inaugural champions is a tired, lazy trope. I mean, that it has to be. I guess you could name the top two contenders or something.
I joked, since it was the IC title, that one of the heels who hasn't been around for a while shows up with the title and say, "Hey, I won this in Rio de Janeiro." It being the IC. Yeah. I'm joking. Same for real. Wait,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it makes sense that there's a tournament. I'm more concerned with the fact that, hey, we're starting it next week without knowing who's involved, how many rounds it is, what's the format of the tournament. That I do disagree with. But hey, we got the Continental Classic also coming on Wednesday, and we also don't know anything on who's involved, and it kind of feels like last minute idea kind of thing. So I agree with that part of it. That's not it doesn't feel like a prestigious tournament.
Yep. All right. Javier, I'll throw to you for anything else on this show that we didn't talk about. I don't think we hit on everything. Is there anything else that you've got notes on or want to comment on? A lot of video features, the CM Punk backstage footage tease for YouTube.
When CM Punk came out, my brother on SmackDown, my brother texted me, well, and just like that, I'm out of the Bloodline storyline.
Oh, God.
Storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Sammy said, people's relationship with Punk are complicated. I mean, they're not running from that.
Retire that double stomp. You know what I'm talking about.
That where you have to sit up to take it.
I hated that. I was actually happy when the first setup didn't work out, because it's the dumbest looking move. I think I really do think that any move looks worse than that to you, Ed?
Nope. Because
that's the worst one.
I did. I praised Nia Jax a decent amount, but I didn't like her scooting into position for Rhea's.
I mean,
that's people.
That's something you could work on. That's not like a, you make sure the person lands right or know how to land on someone. So that's more like a skill issue. But I'm talking about like a straight up move. the fact you have to hold yourself up in this weird position and just for the guy to stomp you, and then you went into that shot, and then like it's two of them, so like, oh, this is cool, you know. I think that's my least favorite of those. Mike Bailey also has a finish that's kind of like that. He has to wait until the guy's on all fours for him to hit his move. That kind of thing. You need to have a guy in a specific position. I hate, but those specifically because you have to be upside down doing a sit up. It's just horrible.
Yeah, the 619, they do, you know, there's like I stun him, I whip him to the ropes, set him up. I mean, it's still contrived. When else does anyone land in that exact position when given that exact kind of momentum shot? But there's some effort made and have it not look like the most fake thing ever. And you know, and this did. So yeah, you can't be immersed when that is happening. Something else I was gonna bring up. Oh, actually, this isn't it, but the Creeds. Did you think the Creeds push sort of been blah? And take anything away from tonight?
Seems like they're going with some sort of personality because they were like acting out in the ring. You know, and commentary was talking about like, you know, there's been a change in them because of what happened last week with Gable. So I think we just saw a little bit because they were like really like, you know, I think we're going for sadistic. It was a bit on the cartoonish side for me, to be honest. But, you know, at least I saw something. Let's see if they, you know, what develops from that.
Very good. All right. Check out Javier's show, Acknowledging WWE. Go VIP and enjoy all the VIP podcasts. You can do it through Patreon. You can go, if you're a Spotify subscriber, just search PWTorch VIP and you'll see our VIP membership pop up. You can order. Because of the cooperation between Patreon and Spotify, you can subscribe directly through Spotify. So that is a cool approach. You can also just go right to patreon.com/PWTorchVIP. We got multiple tiers for you to subscribe to get not only the VIP podcast, but our free ones with the ads removed and also access to our newsletter and our 20 years ago newsletter, which I just read the cover story of. One of the recent 20 years ago newsletters with that backstage disagreement with Stephanie and Vince and some of the nuances of what was going on behind the scenes in the lead up to that, which is fascinating. So a lot of good stuff in those back issues. You can get a full VIP membership, which includes access to the full library. So you can just pick and choose on demand, not only our back issues dating back to the late 1980s, but also our podcast library going back more than 20 years and hundreds of retro radio shows from the 1990s. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Javier, thank you as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh, Jason Paul, ProWrestling.net, scheduled to be my co-host on the flagship this week. Send your email to wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be recording that on a Tuesday afternoon, so get those questions in quick.